Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Build Harem with Anna K Part 2. So do 4 blue hearts. Comment, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Naruto X Rias and Akino uncensored spicy version, link in description. The members of Team 7 were once more waiting at their designated meeting spot on top of the bridge as they waited for ever tardy Kakashi to arrive. In the meantime, each member of the team occupied themselves with their own individual thing. Sasuke stood off to the side brooding while doing his absolute best to ignore the rest of his teammates. Sakura was silently, and sometimes not so silently, gushing over the last Uchiha and everything he did. Haku focused on the water that flowed under the bridge, manipulating it to rise up into the air before freezing it with his bloodline into various shapes and sculptures. Naruto was watching Amidamaru intently as the samurai ghost went through a series of stances and then copying them, with a few corrections from the guardian ghost. Just because Naruto was learning a different sword style didn't mean that the shinobi shaman was going to disregard the years of experience that Amidamaru possessed. It was a few minutes later that Kakashi finally arrived in a cloud of smoke. "Hello everyone," Kakashi greeted merrily, acting as if he wasn't an hour and a half late. "How are my cute little genin today?" "You're late," was his instant, and customary, shouted reply from Naruto and Sakura, both genin stopping what they were doing before to shout at their sensei. Well about that." Kakashi began, unabashed by the reprimand from two of his students. "The Chunin exams are going to be held in Konoha this time around and I just nominated Team 7 to participate." Kakashi announced, withdrawing the registration forms and handing one to each member of Team 7. "Now it is completely up to you individually if you decide to take part in the exams or not," the Junin said, making sure to make eye contact with every genin under his command. His eye focused on Sakura for a fraction of a second longer than everyone else. "Make sure to think this over carefully. Any other details on the exam are on the registration forms." Kakashi finished BEF, or disappearing like he arrived using Shunshin. After receiving the forms from Kakashi, Team 7 took off and soon after ran into Konohamaru and his friends. "Boss!" the youngest Sarutobi shouted excitedly. "Konohamaru?" Naruto murmured confusedly. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Come on boss," Konohamaru whined. "You promised to play ninja with us," the brunette said. "I did," Naruto muttered, scratching the back of his head, not remembering making such a promise as he looked to Haku, hoping the raven-haired boy would remember if he made that promise. Haku giggled, not helping his credibility to his claims of being male. Before answering, "That does sound like you," the ice user supplied. From behind them came a scoff, drawing the attention to a devastated-looking Sakura, who more than likely had just been rejected by Sasuke for a date once more. "A ninja playing ninja," she scorned. "Can you be any more childish?" She finished, coming to a stop next to her teammates. Konohamaru and his friends glared at the pink-haired Kunoichi for her remark, having really been looking forward to playing with Naruto. "Well, who asked you?" Konohamaru shouted while pointing at Sakura accusingly until he took note of something. "What the heck is up with that giant forehead?" the young boy screamed. "Are you some kind of witch?" Naruto, Haku, and the unseen Amidamaru stared at their teammate. The pink-haired Kunoichi gave off a dark, almost miasmic aura, her face shadowed yet her eyes glowing ominously. Slowly Sakura raised her fists and cracked them slowly, Konohamaru oblivious to the horror he had just unleashed. Only made it worse by the fact he continued to call Sakura names and laughing a bit at her. "Konohamaru," Naruto whispered as quietly as he could as to avoid drawing Sakura's ire onto himself. "Run," he advised the boy solemnly. Konohamaru stopped his hashing to look at Naruto confusedly. "Why boss?" the academy student asked. But it wasn't Naruto who spoke up first. "Konohamaru," Sakura growled out, stressing every syllable of the boy's name and drawing his attention back to her. For the first time Konohamaru noticed just how terrifying Sakura appeared at that moment. Survival instincts kicked in at that moment for the young academy student as he bolted, trying to put as much distance between him and Sakura as possible. "Get back here you brat!" Sakura screeched as she gave chase. "Konohamaru!" Moegi and Udon shouted in concern, running after their friend and the girl chasing him down. Naruto and Haku briefly looked at each other considering leaving the Br. Unet to fend for himself and returning to the inn when a startled scream from Konohamaru drew their attention. Concerned, the two ran after the others, and once they turned a corner they came to a sig. HT of Konohamaru being held up by a teen in a black bodysuit with a partial red and green circle on the front that was almost cat-like in appearance. The purple face paint that the teen was wearing made him look even more cat-like. On his back was a large wrapped object. "That hurt you, twerp," the teen muttered, lifting Konohamaru up higher by the boy's scarf. "Let go," Konohamaru demanded, pained as he tried to break loose from the teen's hold. "Please, it was an accident, entirely my fault," Sakura pleaded, Moegi and Udon hiding behind her, to the teen. "Just let him go." Behind the cat-suited teen was a girl around the same age with teal-colored eyes and sandy blonde hair that was pulled into 4 separate spiked pigtails. Her outfit was a light purple single piece that had a scarlet sash tied around her waist and solid black bar-like item held up at the back of her waist by the sash. Around her neck was a headband similar to the one the male teen had attached to the front of his hood. With a sigh and exasperated look on her face, the girl addressed her companion. "Stop fooling around, Kankuro," the girl instructed, identifying the male. "You're going to get us in trouble." "Oh, come on Tamari, this won't take long," Kankuro replied carelessly. "I'll just teach this punk a quick lesson about bumping into people before he gets here." Tamari let out another sigh before wiping her hands of the entire situation. "Whatever, I'm not involved," she stated. "Hey you bastard, let Konohamaru go before I make you regret it," Naruto ordered loudly. Kankuro glared at the blonde shinobi. "Another annoying midget," the black-clad teen muttered. "Hey, why don't you shut up and I'll get to you right after I am done with this brat," Kankuro offered cruelly. "Midget," Naruto roared inside his mind. "Now Naruto, try and stay calm." Amidamaru tried to calm down his shaman partner, well aware of his sensitivity when it came to his height. "You have to stay focused on rescuing Konohamaru. You won't be able to do that if you give into your anger," the samurai spirit advised, using his partner's desire to protect those people important to him to see reason. Although it was rather reluctantly, Naruto calmed himself down, trusting Amidamaru's logic and knowing instinctively that his guardian ghost was right. Taking a few quick calming breaths, not really having the liberty to take his time at that precise moment, Naruto subtly but quickly summoned forth his chakra. When Kankuro cocked his fist back in order to strike Konohamaru, Naruto sprang into action. The chakra that Naruto unleashed not only shot the shinobi forward but also created a small crater in the ground where he was standing moments earlier. Summoning his Bakken, Naruto delivered a quick yet severe strike to Kankuro's wrist on the hand that was holding Konohamaru. With a grunt of pain, Kankuro was forced to release his hold on the young Sarutobi as he now held his aching wrist. Even as Konohamaru scampered away, Kankuro was focused entirely on Naruto as he glared at the younger shinobi, his anger rising even further when he realized he had been hit with a simple Bakken. "You're going to pay for that," Kankuro said threateningly, reaching for the package on his back. Tamari's eyes widened as she watched her companion reach for the item she carried. "You're seriously going to use Karasu?" Tamari questioned in surprise. AROCK being thrown at Kankuro and bouncing off his headband kept him from answering Tamari's question. Tracing back the flight path of the rock revealed that Sasuke was the one who threw it, if the other rock he was casually tossing up and down in his hand was any indication, as he sat on top of a branch of a nearby tree. "Another guy, that's going to piss me off," Kankuro growled out, though the lie blush that adorned Temari's cheeks as she gazed at Sasuke showed that she didn't share in Kankuro's annoyance. "If you're smart then you'd leave right now," the Uchiha stated coolly. Sasuke, Sakura cheered joyfully with hearts in her eyes at the sight of the Uchiha. "Damn it Sasuke, why are you stealing my spotlight?" Naruto demanded, pointing accusingly at the Avenger. "I somehow don't think that's what's important right at this moment, Naruto," Amidamaru said honestly yet awkwardly at the same time, only to be ignored by his shaman. Kankuro growled lowly, about to unwrap Karasu only to stop before the bandages could even begin to fall off by another voice. "That's enough Kankuro," a gravelly voice said, causing Kankuro to freeze up, and shocking just about everyone else. Looking toward the Source of the voice revealed a shinobi hanging upside down from a tree branch in the same tree that Sasuke was in. You're a disgrace to our village. The male said coldly. I didn't even sense him. Sasuke thought in equal parts shock and anger. Anger at once more being outclassed by someone. The newly arrived male had bright red messy hair and green eyes. He wore black clothing with a white cloth going over his right shoulder and a brown leather band that helped him carry a large gourd that was on his back, his headband tied around the band. He had black rings around his eyes and kanji 4. Love tattooed on the left side of his forehead. Gaara. Kankuro said almost fearfully, naming the teen. In a swirl of sand, Gaara disappeared from the tree branch only to reappear seconds later in another swirl of sand between Kankuro and Temari. Listen, they street. Kankuro began trying to stave off any blame only to be cut off. Shut up. Gaara told him, looking at Kankuro out of the corner of his eye. Or I'll kill you, he threatened. Right. Kankuro gulped. Sorry. Gaara turned his attention away from Kankuro to the Konoha shinobi across from them, Sasuke having joined them now. What ka? Nikuro failed to notice, but he had was that the other black-haired effeminate-looking teen held a few senbon in one hand while the temperature around them slowly dropped. Gaara assumed that he was the one responsible. If the light coating of ice on the senbon was any indication. Let's go. Gaara ordered as he turned to walk away, the other two instantly complying. Hold on a second. Sakura called out after them. What are a bunch of shinobi from Sunagakure doing in Konoha? She questioned them. Temari turned to face Sakura with a condescending look on her face. Don't you know anything? Temari returned. We're here for the Chunin exams. She told them, holding out her pass for them to see. While that explained why they were there, Sasuke was still not entirely satisfied. You, with the gourd, what's your name? The Uchiha all but demanded. Gaara had been walking away when he stopped at Sasuke's inquisition. He contemplated just leaving for a second before turning around. Gaara of the desert. Gaara said, introducing himself. I'm also interested in your name. Sasuke smirked at the redhead. It's Sas. Not you. Gaara stopped him. The blonde one. The redhead said, staring unblinkingly straight at Naruto. The two shinobi stared each other down for a moment before Naruto finally answered. Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage. Naruto proudly declared. Without another word, Gaara turned and left along with his two companions. Right after the members of Team 7, along with Konohamaru and his two friends, left as well, never noticing the three people that been watching them. We're home. Naruto announced as he stepped into the entrance of the Flame Inn, Haku, Konohamaru and his friends behind him. Welcome back. Anna greeted as she walked into the entrance with her arms crossed in front of her. Her eyes shifted from Naruto then to Haku before finally settling on Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon. And just what are you, runts, doing back here? She questioned them. Runts. Konohamaru nearly shouted out, offended. For some reason Konohamaru found himself being held back by Moegi and Udon, as they grabbed an arm each, as if to keep him from retaliating because of the comment. Konohamaru wasn't sure why, since even he didn't know what he would have done, and Anna managed to scare him more with the look she was giving him, somehow managing to appear impassive through it all. Than the incident from earlier with the Suna shinobi. Once she realized that Konohamaru wasn't going to be doing anything, Moegi released her hold on him and focused on Anna. Gazing up at the older girl as respectively and innocently as possible in hopes of garnering some goodwill. Miss Anna. Moegi began tentatively, and once she had the older girl's attention. Boss promised he would play ninja with us today. So, the young kunoichi to be trailed off near the end. Anna gazed at the girl unwavering for a moment before turning her sights in the other two academy students, each with a hopeful look on their face. Before letting out a sigh with a roll of her eyes. Fine, she said, giving her permission, causing the Konohamaru corps to cheer before speaking directly to Naruto. You can go, but leave 20 shadow clones to study the Kido scrolls and practice chakra control. Anna instructed. Right. Naruto instantly agreed, forming the specified number of clones. Let's go, boss. Konohamaru cheered as he, Moegi, and Udon took off to the Flame Inn's backyard, Naruto giving chase. Haku smiled at the scene, almost causing him to laugh before his attention focused on Anna, who had ALR. Edie directed the clones on what their individual tasks. I am a little surprised. Haku admitted, drawing Anna attention. I would have thought you'd make Naruto train instead of go with them, or send one of his clones. The Hyouten user revealed. Anna stared at Haku blankly for a second before turning her focus back on the clones as she let a low hum. Naruto made a promise. Anna started. I wasn't about to allow him to break it. Even with a technicality. She finished decisively. Naruto's promises meant as much to Anna as they did to him. Naruto did after all make her the most important promise of them all. Haku smiled serenely as Anna walked into the inn, either to read another of her magazines or even prepare dinner, as he was witness to another example of how much Anna really cared about Naruto and the things that were important to him. Ellipsis. Iruka watched Naruto interact with Konohamaru and his friends with a fond smile on his face. The academy teacher had sought out his former stud Ent in order to test him to determine for himself if Naruto was really ready for the Chunin exams that Kakashi had entered him in. Like the rest of the rookie genin, Naruto had met and exceeded Iruka's expectations. So while the Chunin was still worried, he'd at least admit that Naruto and the others deserved to participate. Are you satisfied now? A voice from beside him asked him. Iruka started. At the voice having been so deep in his own thoughts about Naruto and the others that he hadn't even noticed the person standing right next to him. Looking at the blonde girl next to him, Iruka felt. She was familiar to him somehow, and it didn't take him long to realize why. He and Naruto had bonded during the young shinobi final year at the academy, often going out to eat ramen at Ichiraku, so it took him a second. Iruka eventually recognized the blonde girl standing beside him. Yes, Iruka replied, taking one more quick look at Naruto and the others before returning his attention to Anna. Naruto proved himself more than capable to handle the trials he will face during the upcoming Chunin exams. Iruka believed. I was honestly a little surprised at how far he's progressed in such a short amount of time. The academy teacher confessed. I'm sure that's thanks to you. Anna smirked for a moment before shaking her head, but never losing that smirk. I might have played a part, but Naruto's become this strong because of his own determination. No matter how hard I make his training, Naruto only complains a little at the beginning before giving it his all. Anna told Iruka. Still, Iruka continued, his attention completely focused on Anna now. Knowing Naruto, you've only been a help to him all these years to get him to this point. The brown-haired teacher insisted. Maybe. Anna finally relented. Anna liked to believe that out of everyone in the entire world she knew Naruto the best and had the most faith in him. That's why she believed that Naruto could become strong even without her help. Naruto had the will, determination, and a dream he was striving for after all. Either way, Anna continued, Naruto's told me about you, Iruka-sensei. Thank you for looking after him. I know how hard it is to get that idiot to sit still long enough to teach him anything. Anna said. Well, it wasn't easy and he rarely listened to my lectures. Iruka admitted with an amused smile. But I know that Naruto has the potential to be a great shinobi someday. The Chunin said back before bowing slightly to Anna. Also, please take good care of Naruto. Iruka asked. Of course, Anna replied definitively. Hey Anna. Iruka-sensei. Naruto shouted, running up to the pair. How about we all go to Ichiraku Ramen? The blonde shinobi shaman suggested hopefully. Iruka nodded his head in agreement. Sure. It's been a while since we've gone to eat ramen together. Iruka agreed. Anna sighed in exasperation before nodding her head once. Fine, I suppose we can go eat some ramen tonight. The blonde Itako said. The main reason that Anna decided to go along with Naruto's request was because it would give her fiancé the chance to spend time with Iruka and Ichiraku's before the start of the Chunin exams that Haku had told her they'd most likely be participating in. I'll go get Haku, Anna declared, walking back to the inn. I trust this is your treat, right Iruka-sensei? Anna asked, though didn't wait for a reply. Iruka blinked a couple of times as he let Anna's question sink in. Wait, what? He said, tearing his gaze away from Anna's retreating form to look at Naruto, Konohamaru, Moegi, and Udon, who were staring back at him with wide smiles on their faces. What have I gotten myself into? The man muttered to himself, lamenting how much lighter his wallet would be by the end of the night. Ellipsis. This is nice. I could definitely get used to this. Iruka mumbled as he soaked in the Flame Inn's hot springs after the group had finished eating ramen at Ichiraku. I know what you mean, Iruka-sensei. Naruto said in blissful agreement from where he rested within the hot springs, overjoyed that he could partake in this every day if he wanted. Anna had invited the man to take a dip on two conditions. First, that he understood that he was only getting to use the hot springs this one time for free no matter what his relationship was with Naruto, and second, that he be sure to tell everyone he knows about the Flame Inn in order to drum up business. Iruka had to admit that he found Anna, besides a little unsettling at times, interesting. At times the Chunin instructor would think the blonde girl reminded him of his former student Sasuke Uchiha in comportment, at least in the general sense. But then when Anna actually spoke or interacted with others, she seemed quite genuine and one of the forced politeness or tolerance that Sasuke had exhibited during his schooling. The differences between Sasuke and Anna were all the more evident when the young girl was focused on Naruto. Then with only a few hours of knowing Anna, Iruka could clearly see the love and devotion that she held for Naruto. It did make Iruka wonder how far Naruto's feeling for Anna went in return. "Hey Naruto." Iruka began drawing the younger boy's attention. "What is it, Iruka-sensei?" Naruto asked, looking over to the older man curiously. "I hope you realize just how lucky you are to have someone like Anna," Iruka told Naruto seriously. Naruto had a look of surprise on his face for a moment, not having expected Iruka to say something like that. "Of course, I do," Naruto replied immediately as he suddenly became thoughtful with a small smile on his face. "Since the day we met, Anna has been the only one to always believe in me and supported me no matter what. I don't ever want to lose that," Naruto said earnestly. "Anna is the person I consider most precious to me." Iruka gazed at Naruto with his own smile. Looking at him now, it was clear that Naruto did have feelings for Anna. How strong Iruka still wasn't sure. But with time they would only grow stronger. "As long as you realize that," Iruka eventually said as he closed his eyes and once more simply enjoyed the hot springs. The next day Naruto and Haku stood at the entrance of the Flame Inn while Anna reclined against the door. It was the day of the first stage of the Chunin exams and Naruto and Haku were about to go meet up with Sasuke and Sakura in front of the academy. Haku was wearing his normal shinobi outfit except his mask was hanging off his waist, slightly modified so it no longer held the Kiri insignia. "Alright, we're heading out now," Naruto told Anna with a large grin. Anna hummed thoughtfully for a second. "Hold on a second, Naruto," Anna said, causing the two shinobi to stop and look at Anna curiously. "Here, I got you this," she told him as she tossed him something. Naruto caught it, and once he did, he realized that it was an orange present box with a black ribbon. Looking at Anna and getting a nod, Naruto eagerly opened it, taking the lid off of the box. Inside, Naruto found a new pair of goggles, these black with orange tinted glasses. Naruto took the goggles out of the box and stared at them in slight surprise. They were sleeker than his old ones, he noticed as he put them on, sliding his headband so it rested around his neck, and adjusted them a little bit. "They look good on you," Anna said with a small approving smile. "You think so?" Naruto asked bashfully, a light blush dusting his cheeks, as he adjusted them a bit more. Naruto treasured the original goggles that Anna gave him because they were a reminder of her that he always could have with him, and he was sure he'd treasure these just as much. Anna nodded before her smile disappeared and she narrowed her eyes. Just one more thing, she saw it before throwing her beaded necklace out as it wrapped around an until then invisible Amidamaru. "There," the Idiko said, satisfied. "Now, have a nice day, sweetie." "Why?" Amidamaru cried with crocodile tears streaming down his face. Knowing that Naruto and would be wondering the same thing, Haku staring in slight confusion, Anna answered Amidamaru's question. "Then Chunin exams are meant to test Naruto's abilities as a shinobi." Anna began as she stared right at Naruto. "I also want this to be a test of your powers as a shaman without relying on spirit unity to fight," she finished explaining. Before meeting back up in Wave, while Naruto had access to his Furioku, he didn't have any techniques at his disposal that didn't require him to be in unity with Amidamaru. But now Naruto had been studying Kido for a good while, and Anna wanted to determine how well her fiancé could integrate it with his shinobi training. Naruto nodded his head in understanding, seeing this as another one of Anna's little tests for him. If he was going to grow as a shaman, Naruto knew that he couldn't rely solely on Amidamaru, so while memorizing Kido was boring for the blonde, Naruto knew that it would ultimately Why help him keep his promise to Anna to become Shaman King? I won't let you down. Naruto swore, thumping his chest. A small smile crossed Anna's face. I know. Anna replied as a given. Now get going or you two are going to be late. She instructed. Right, Naruto said as he and Haku left for the academy. No, Naruto, please don't leave me behind. Amidamaru wailed to his departing shaman. Once Naruto was out of sight, though Amidamaru's expression instantly became somber. Are you sure this is wise, Anna? The samurai spirit questioned. I have heard from some of the other ghosts in the area the Chunin exams are quite dangerous. It is not uncommon for there to be fatalities amongst the participants of the exams. Anna was silent for a good long moment, staring at the gates to the inn that Naruto and Haku had walked out of. Taking Amidamaru's concerns seriously, all the while pushing her own concerns to the side. I'm sure, Anna declared clearly as she turned to go back inside. I have faith in Naruto. She finished. Naruto and Haku soon met up with Sasuke and Sakura outside the academy and quickly made their way inside where the first part of the exam was to take place. Walking up a flight of stairs, the members of Team 7 found a crowd trying to gain access to a room marked as 301, only to be impeded by a couple of shinobi that stood guard in front of the door to the room. Haku wondered, as he watched Sasuke in exasperation, if the Uchiha acted out of arrogance or stupidity when he revealed that they were currently only on the second floor. Either way, both were traits that were terrible for shinobi to have. Are you sure that was wise, Sasuke? Haku questioned the other raven-haired boy. Revealing that to everyone, he inquired as they made their way towards the Tool 301 after encountering a very strange genin outside the room that turned out to be 201 under a genjutsu. The genin was a boy with black hair in a bowl cut, large fuzzy eyebrows, and bug eyes, wrapped up in green jumpsuit and orange legwarmers. And his speed. He just might be faster than me while I'm using my crystal ice mirrors. Haku thought to himself. His speed had been something that Haku had been proud of. But Haku was more than willing to admit that he would have to get faster in order to keep up with the genin from before. The Uchiha seemed to scoff at the question as if anything he did could ever be a mistake. If they fell for such an obvious genjutsu, they're hardly worth considering. Sasuke claimed confidently. Like that one genin that stopped you before. Haku retorted, getting a scowl from Sasuke. A few minutes later, the members of Team 7 wearily made their way to room 301 where Kakashi was waiting for them. Sasuke's pride was hurt having faced off against the green-clad genin who had identified himself as Rock Lee and gotten his ass kicked. Even with the Uchiha clan's famous Sharingan, Sasuke couldn't land a hit on Lee and ended up being saved at the last moment by a giant turtle and an eccentric look-alike of Lee's that turned out to be his Junin sensei, Maeda Guy. When Haku pointed out that this was one of the genin that he thought so lowly of, it infuriated Sasuke all the more. Good you're here, to Sakura. Kakashi observed. Now you can all officially enter the exam. Kakashi-sensei. What are you doing here? Sakura asked, surprised to see the gray-haired Junin standing at the entrance to the room. Kakashi gave his subordinates an ice smile as he answered. Despite what I said yesterday, if any one of you had not shown up, then I am afraid that I'd have to stop you here from entering. Kakashi told them. But why lie to us? The Pink Kid questioned. If I told you the truth, I thought you would feel obligated, even pressured by the others, to take part in the exams. Kakashi admitted honestly. This had to be your choice and I am glad you made it. Kakashi said, stepping to the side to let them pass through. Walking into the room, the members of Team 7 were shocked by the sheer number of shinobi that were waiting in the room, some noticeably older than them. Just walking into the room, Team 7 perceived the tense atmosphere and how they were almost being glared at by everyone else. Sasuke, you're here. A female voice shouted happily as suddenly someone jumped on the Uchiha's back. Sakura glared angrily at the girl. Ino, pig, get off of Sasuke. The green-eyed girl shouted. Ino Yamanaka, a girl with long blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, blue eyes, and wearing a purple outfit, stopped snuggling into Sasuke in order to direct an annoyed look at Sakura. Well, if it isn't Forehead, I see you're here too. Ino said snidely. How troublesome. A voice said tiredly. You guys are here too. Shikamaru Nara said as he walked up to the rest his best friend. Choji Akamaiki, beside him, said. The Nara eyed Haku carefully, wondering who the black-haired teenager was. Yo, Choji said, eating potato chips out of the bag that he was carrying him. Yahoo! Kiba Inuzuka cheered excitedly, Akamaru riding on his head, with a fanged grin. Well, looks like we're all here. The rookie 9 all together. Hinata Hyuga gave a SMA. LL meek smile that was directed mostly at Naruto. Hello. The brunette mumbled softly, a light blush on her face, though not loud enough to be heard above her boisterous teammate. The Hyuga hair. SS took careful note of Naruto's appearance and instantly noticed his new goggles. Shino Aburame just stood silently beside his teammates, observing everyone silently. Geez, you guys are here too. Shikamaru murmured dryly. Hey, wait a minute, Kiba said, finally noticing Haku. Who the hell are you? The Inuzuka questioned bluntly. Haku smiled pleasantly at everyone once their attention turned towards him. My name is Haku. It is a pleasure to meet you all. The ice user greeted everyone amiably. Ino looked Haku over carefully, taking in his long black hair, snow-white skin, and gentle smile. All right sister, listen up. Ino started off with a narrow-eyed glare. I don't really care who you are, as long as you stay away from my Sasuke. The Yamanaka ordered. What was that pig? Sakura demanded angrily. You heard me. Ino snapped back as the two kunoichi began to glare at one another. Haku laughed a bit at the two. That's not a problem. I am not interested in boys. Haku told Ino, drawing her and everyone's attention back to him. And by the way, I'm a boy. He revealed, taking some joy at everyone's surprised looks. No frigging way, Kiba said disbelievingly, voicing everyone's thoughts. Looking at Haku, Kiba would have said that he was the prettiest girl that he had ever seen. Their age anyway. Hey, you guys should be more quiet. Someone advised as they approached the group. Who do you think you are? Ino asked him. The teen had gray hair pulled into a ponytail, a purple outfit and round glasses. I'm Kabuto. But really you should look behind you. He told them with a smirk on his face. The rookies looked behind them to see nearly the entire room now openly glaring at them. Those guys closest to you are aim nin, they tend to have short tempers. Although everyone is nervous about the exams really. Kabuto said as he looked them all over, taking note of a couple of people in particular. You guys remind me of me when I was taking the exams for the first time. Ah, you said your name was Kabuto, right? Sakura asked hesitantly. Yup, Kabuto answered. So, does that mean this is your second time? The pinkett questioned him. Nope, my seventh. Kabuto admitted unashamedly. The exams are held twice a year, so this is my fourth year. Kiba scoffed at the gray-haired teen. Then why the hell should we listen to you? Kiba said reproachfully. Now, Kabuto said placatingly, pulling a deck of cards out of one of his pockets. How about I offer you some help with my ninja info cards? Ninja info cards? Sakura repeated, staring at the cards in wonder. That's right, Kabuto confirmed, laying a single card on the ground. They're the accumulated knowledge of 4 years of work while taking these exams. All it takes a bit of my chakra. He stated. How about info on individual? Sasuke asked, stepping forward in interest. Of course, Kabuto replied readily. Just tell me something about these guys and I'll look them up for you. Gaara of the Desert, Rock Lee from Konoha. And, Sasuke began before looking back over at Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. He stated. Since Wave, Sasuke has had mounting questions about Naruto's abilities and he was determined to have them answered by any means necessary. What the hell, Sasuke? Naruto shouted angrily. What's the big idea? Oh, you even know their names well, that makes things easy. Kabuto said, pulling 3 cards out of the deck of cards. Sasuke ignored him as he focused on Kabuto. Show me, the Uchiha demanded insistently. Alright, first up is Rock Lee. Kabuto began showing them the card as he laid it on the ground. His teammates are Tenten and Neji Hyuga. No one noticed Hinata shift uncomfortably at Neji's name. They are led by Maeda Guy. He has outstanding taijutsu skills. His nin jutsu and genjutsu are nothing remarkable though. Kabuto said before replacing Lee's card with one with Gaara's picture on it and whistling appreciatively at what he saw. Gaara of the Desert. Missio. N history. 8C rank and even 1B rank mission as a genin. I don't have much on him since he is a newcomer from a foreign country. But what important note is that he returned from all of his missions without even a scratch. he revealed. Everyone seemed to be a little shaken about the information that they just discovered about Gaara before Kabuto continued placing one final card on the ground. Kabuto moved to continue as he replaced the cards for the third time. Finally, Naruto Uzumaki, he began only to stop before he could reveal anything else when a foot stomped on the card causing Kabuto to reel back. Looking up, Kabuto found that the foot belonged to Haku, who was standing over the glasses wearing teen. From his foot, ice slowly started to spread across the floor. Haku stared at Kabuto with a chilling stare for a few more seconds before turning his attention towards Sasuke. Sasuke, I don't mind you choosing to reveal information about our competitors, but I don't think divulging the skills of our teammate is wise. He told the Uchiha, lifting his foot to reveal the ruined card. The two black-haired teens stared each other down for a few seconds before Sasuke eventually looked off. From Haku without saying a single word in response. Kabuto stared at the two for a couple of seconds before moving on. He told the gathered group of genin a bit more about those participating in the Chunin exams. One particular part agitated a certain team. So, Oto is nothing to worry about. One genin with spiked up hair similar to Kakashi muttered, as he glared at Kabuto. How about we show them how much of a threat we are? A second genin that looked like a mummy offered, getting nods of agreement from his teammates. The third was a girl with long black hair. Three took off charging at Kabuto, weaving between the other competitors as they closed in on Kabuto. Kabuto spotted them once they started their approach, moving away from the kunai thrown at him from above by the genin with spiky hair. Although caught a little by surprise when the mummified genin suddenly appeared in front of him, Kabuto still dodged the punch that was thrown at him, it missing by a few inches. It was shocking then when Kabuto's glasses suddenly shattered and he fell over, throwing up. What's going on? Sasuke asked suspiciously. He dodged that. How pathetic. The mummy genin muttered, looking down at Kabuto. Aren't you supposed to be a 4-year veteran? The shinobi said disdainfully. Put this on your little cards. The spiky-haired genin started. The genin from Otogakure will definitely become Chunin. The tense atmosphere ended when a sudden explosion came from the front of the room, drawing everyone's attention. All right, all you shut up and settle down. A man's voice shouted from the cloud of smoke at the front. When the smoke started to clear, it revealed a man wearing a gray uniform under black trench coat, with a bandana on his head, and numerous scars. Behind him were numerous shinobi wearing the same gray uniform. My name is Ibiki Morino, the proctor of the first test of the Chunin exams. Ibiki introduced himself before focusing a deadly glare on the Oto shinobi. You three, I suggest you stop doing whatever you please unless you want to fail out of the exams already. Ibiki warned. Sorry, the mummy said insincerely. This is our first time in the exams and we got a little overexcited. He tried to explain. Ibiki scoffed, not at all pleased by his explanation. I am only going to say this once, so pay attention. Fighting is not allowed without the examiner's permission, and even then, killing your opponent will not be tolerated. Ibiki told everyone, focusing especially on the Oto genin. Anyone who disobeys me will be failed immediately. Am I clear? With some obvious reluctance, the Oto genin nodded their heads in understanding. We will now begin the first test of the Chunin exams. Ibiki announced loudly as he set about rearranging everyone into their assigned seats for the exam. A written test. Once everyone was in their assigned seats, Ibiki proceeded to explain the rules for the test. The most prominent, anybody that got caught cheating, would be eliminated along with their teammates, and that anyone who failed to answer even one question on the test would be disqualified along with their team. Naruto was at the point of tearing his hair out several minutes later as he tried to make sense of at least one of the questions in front of him. Written tests had always been his greatest weakness in the academy, and once he had graduated, Naruto had been sure that he had seen the last of them. What was worse was the knowledge that if Amidamaru wasn't being held captive by Anna for the duration of the exam, he could ask the ghost to check out other examinees' papers for the answers for him. The guy in front of him seemed to have all the answers. Unfortunately, knowing Amidamaru as he did, it was very likely that the samurai spirit would refuse to cheat for Naruto's sake. Naruto's worrying came to a sudden halt when he sensed murderous intent being directed at him from behind him. With a nervous gulp, Naruto was too afraid to look behind him to discover the source of the malicious intent. Although he was fairly certain it was Sasuke and Sakura since they were well aware of his academic past. Sasuke and Sakura's malintent at the very least managed to snap Naruto out of his self-destructive thoughts concerning the written exams and focus. It was obvious that the point of the exam was to cheat in order to get the answers. Anna forced the shinobi to be more observant in order to notice such things. And to better take care of himself, though Anna had hardly mentioned that when stressing its importance. His own skills, Naruto realized, were mostly for combat. Even the Kido that he was learning served that purpose. The closest technique he possessed for the purpose of reconnaissance would be the Shadow Clone Jutsu, but he was hardly proficient enough with the Jutsu to be able to use it in a room filled with people and not be noticed. "Na Naruto," a voice to his right said in a soft and gentle whisper. Looking to his right, Naruto spotted Hinata Hyuga sitting next to him. "Oh, Hinata." Naruto began, a bit of surprise entering his voice. "I didn't notice you there," he said honestly, his worrying about the exam having played a very big part in him not noticing her. Hinata tried to make eye contact with Naruto only to look shyly away seconds later with a light blush dusting her cheeks. "If you want," she began, hesitantly sliding her exam paper closer to Naruto. "You can copy my answers," the Hyuga heiress offered. Naruto gazed at Hinata, an action that caused the young Kunoichi's blush to darken and fidget the tiniest bit. Disbelievingly, hardly being able to wrap his head around the proposition. For a moment, Naruto wondered if this was a trap devised by the members of Team 8. But Hinata was nice, really quiet and kind of weird. But she seemed nice. She wouldn't do something like that. Naruto thought to himself. "I wouldn't put it past Kiba though." Naruto continued mentally picturing Kiba cackling evilly while Akamaru had a similar look on its face. And Shino. Naruto didn't really know Shino that well, so it was still kind of easy for him to see the distant Aburame heir bullying Hinata alongside Kiba. Those bastards. Naruto cursed them. No way would Hinata agree to that. The shinobi shaman realized as he looked at the brunette carefully, causing a deeper blush than Naruto thought possible. And she isn't acting any different. A grin quickly broke out across Naruto's face at his lucky break as he came to a decision. Fortunately, or unfortunately, before Naruto could even get a pay at Hinata, paper kunai flew between the two Konoha genin, scaring the crap out of Naruto, as it wedged itself into the table behind them and into another examinee's paper. The kunai had the effect of having Naruto realize what the repercussions of what he had been about to do. More importantly, what Anna would have done to him if, once, she found out. While he could probably get Anna to accept the fact that the point of the first test was to get the answers without being caught, he seriously doubted that his fiancé would agree that copying the answers was the best way. "Naruto?" Hinata questioned, once more offering her sheet as discreetly as she could. Naruto though refused with a shake of his head and a reassuring smile being directed at Hinata. "Thanks, Hinata," he whispered to her softly. "But don't worry. I totally got this handled," Naruto told her as confidently as he could. Hinata stared back at Naruto for a couple seconds before finally saying something. "Are you sure, Naruto?" Hinata asked him. Having watched Naruto throughout their years at the academy, she knew exactly how much he struggled with written exams. "Of course," Naruto answered. With a small yet disappointed smile at not being able to help Naruto, Hinata accepted Naruto's decision. "Okay, if you're sure," Hinata said softly. "I have no choice," Naruto rationalized as he stared up at the clock. "I'll have to bet everything on answering the 10th question." Haku looked across the room carefully. With a teacher like Zabuza, Haku was able to figure out the answer to a couple of questions easily enough. Others not so much. Zabuza not seeing a point in teaching them to Haku while they were on the run like they were and the jobs that they would take as a result. To compensate, Haku formed small ice mirrors that would be impossible to be seen by the examiners because of how they were positioned, while reflecting answer sheets back to him. A subtle manipulation of his Kekkei Genkei that he had been developing since arriving in Konoha. Now though the Hyouten user was worried about his blonde friend, who he could tell was feeling extremely distressed. Who would have thought that someone so confident and boisterous would have such trouble with written test? Haku thought, almost wishing to laugh. With how gung-ho Naruto was about with just about everything, Haku found it a little amusing that there was something that caused such a reaction in the shaman. Haku had seen Naruto be enthusiastic about studying his Kido scrolls, but Haku figured that it was because Naruto was forced to sit still for long periods of time. I guess if Naruto is so opposed to studying, it would make sense he would have trouble with written tests. Haku rationalized with an amused smile. Okay, and now, Ibiki began on. See, there was only 15 minutes left in the exam. We will begin the 10th question, he announced. Now before we get into it, I'd like to go over the added rules for this question. First of all, you must decide whether you will take it or not. Just as some people started to mutter about the choice, Ibiki continued speaking. If you choose not to, your points will be reduced to 0. You will fail along with you two teammates. The scarred man announced clearly. Then of course we will decide to take the question. Tamari shouted out obviously. That's where the other rule comes in, Ibiki said, without reacting to all the shouting coming from the test takers. If you choose to take it and answer incorrectly, that person will lose the right to take the Chunin selection exam again. The pro-seater for the first test said clearly, rendering the room completely silent for a minute. What kind of stupid rule is that? Kiba protested angrily. There are guys here who have taken the exam before. Ibiki started to chuckle, his laughter unnerving people all the more. You guys were unlucky, he told them. This year it's my rules. But I am giving you a way out. Those that aren't confident can choose not to take it. And try again next year. Those that do not wish to take it, raise your hand once your number is confirmed, leave. For a couple of minutes the room was deathly silent as everyone contemplated what they were going to do. Eventually a single person raised their hand, the one sitting next to Naruto, and the floodgates opened up. Slowly the numbers dwindling down. Naruto took deep breaths and he tried to keep himself from shaking. It was a nightmare for the blonde shaman, to be stuck for the rest of his life as a genin if he failed to answer one question. His dream of becoming Hokage at risk. For a second Naruto doubted himself, whether he would be able to answer the 10th question correctly or not. Then that second passed. Naruto raised his hand up high, shocking all those who knew him and how no matter how hopeless or impossible Naruto Uzumaki never was one to give up, before slamming it down. The act caused everyone's attention to immediately snap towards Naruto, staring at him in surprise as the whiskered teen glared at Ibiki. Don't underestimate me. I won't run away, Naruto shouted resolutely. There are things that I still need to do. Someone that believes in me. I won't let one stupid test get in the way of that. Ibiki focused in on Naruto, staring at the blonde genin seriously. I will ask you again, Ibiki stated. Your life is riding on this decision. This is your last chance to quit. I won't go back on my word. That's my ninja way. Naruto answered, staring back at Ibiki unwaveringly. I will become Hokage. And I will pass this test. The shinobi shaman declared. Ibiki shifted his gaze away from Naruto to look around the room at the other examinees. Whatever doubt there might have been before in anyone was now gone. Things were still a little tense, but they were all determined to take the question. Stretching this any longer won't make any difference, Ibiki thought, looking at his subordinates who nodded in approval. Fine. Now to everyone still remaining, Ibiki paused, enjoying how everyone tensed up further for just a moment. I congratulate you on passing the first test, he announced loudly. With some questions and about the 10th question, Ibiki explained with a grin, something that served to unsettle the room full of genin more than anything, the purpose of the 10th question along with the first 9. Ibiki told them, and showed them, how important it was, the ability to gather information and the lengths some would go to. You made it through the entrance. The first test of the Chunin selection exam is now finished. I wish you all luck. Ibiki had no sooner finished and people were about to celebrate when a large object smashed through the window. A large banner, held up by a few kunai, announced a woman in the tan trench coat. With purple hair pulled into a spiked ponytail, and light brown pupil-less eyes, to be Anko Mitarashi. Below her coat the woman wore a mesh bodysuit that went down to her thighs. A dark orange mini skirt with a dark blue belt, and gray shin guards over standard shinobi sandals. More than one male genin drank in the woman's curvaceous body hungrily. This is no time to be celebrating, Anko declared loudly. I am the examiner for the second test. Anko Mitarashi. Now let's go. Despite Enko's declaration, nobody moved or said a word. "Read the room," Ibiki said from behind Enko's banner. "Bad timing, as usual." With an embarrassed look on her face, Enko took a scrutinizing look around the room, noticing the number of people in the room. "Hey Ibiki, what's the big deal?" the woman demanded. "You left 26 teams pass. The test was too easy," Enko stated. "Or we have some interesting candidates this time," the scarred man retorted. "Whatever," Enko muttered. Quote, "I'll at least cut them in half in the second test," the purple-haired woman claimed, a predatory gleam in her eyes as she gazed at the genin. Anna fixed her appearance in front of a mirror a while after Naruto and Haku had left for the first part of the Chunin exam. Since she had first heard of the Chunin exam, Anna knew that it would be the perfect chance to talk with the Sandaime Hokage. The topic of conversation: Naruto's parentage and the reason behind why the Hokage is choosing to keep it a secret from him. She already had a Midamaru's pedestal in a bag she was carrying and was ready to set out to the Hokage Tower. The Itako was at the front door to her home when it suddenly opened. While most people would either be shocked, scared, or angry that someone would suddenly barge into their home, not Anna. There were a few reasons. First of all, her home was also an inn, so it made sense that people wouldn't usually knock when entering. Secondly, she had a faint thought of the people standing on the other side of the door even before it opened. Thirdly, she wouldn't be Anna Kyoyama someday Uzumaki if she visibly reacted. With her arms crossed in front of her, Anna gazed at the three PLE before her with an apathetic look on her face, her gaze shifting between the three, finally setting on one specific person, the only one that she knew. "What are you doing here, Kakashi?" Anna asked bluntly, slightly surprising the two people accompanying the gray-haired Junin at how she was addressing the man. Kakashi scratched the back of his head sheepishly as the two Junin accompanying Kakashi studied Anna carefully. The first was a male with short spiky black hair, beard, wearing the standard Junin uniform with a cigarette in his mouth. The other person was a woman with wavy black hair and ruby red eyes. She wore a red dress with white bandage-like wrappings wrapped around her. "Easy there," Kakashi began placatingly. "Calm down, there's no need for any sort of hostility. These are Asuma Sarutobi and Kurenai Yuhi, the senseis, of teams 10 and 8 respectively." Kakashi introduced her. "I thought that you would like to know that Naruto and the others passed the first test of the Chunin exams," Kakashi told her. "I see," Anna answered, her expression not changing, but inwardly happy with the information. "So was Midamaru, not that anyone but Anna could tell. But that isn't the only reason that you're here," the Itako stated, not asked. Kakashi once more found himself scratching the back of his head at being found out. "Well, I thought we could take this chance to enjoy the Flame Inn's hot springs as a sort of celebration for our teams passing the first test," Kakashi admitted unabashedly. Anna stared at the three Junin silently for a minute before letting out a sigh. "Fine," Anna said. The sudden sound of footsteps coming from behind her. A couple of seconds later, a woman with black hair pulled into a bun, wearing a purple yukata with red obi, walked up from behind Anna. The strange thing about the woman was the ceiling tag that hid her face from view. "I have somewhere I need to be, so she'll take care of you," Anna told them. Earlier she had created a few PLE paper shikigami to look after the inn just in case the inn suddenly had any customers. The woman gave the Junin a bow, not saying a word, but her body language was clearly welcoming them to the inn. Asuma and Kurenai stared at the woman oddly, both a little weirded out by the tag hiding her face. Kakashi on the other hand took it in stride, having a better understanding of things. That is to say, it wasn't that he didn't find it strange, just that he was better prepared for it than his two friends. "Oh," Kakashi uttered curiously. "Anything you need help with?" he asked, more than willing to help his student's fiancé. "No," Anna answered simply. "I'm just going to meet with someone to discuss a few things," she explained, walking past the Junin. "Don't trash the place, or you will be the cleaning it up. And stay off the third floor," Anna instructed, not even looking back at them as she walked away. Ellipsis. Several minutes later, the Junin were resting in one of the inn's lounges, enjoying tea that had been prepared for them by the attendant that Anna left them with. They had changed out of their normal attire, now wearing kimonos provided by the inn. They had decided to relax a little and talk before partaking of the inn's hot springs. which Kurenai was especially happy to learn was completely private. "So, Kakashi," Kurenai began, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. "Who exactly was that girl? She seemed to know you personally," she asked the gray-haired Junin. Kakashi hummed thoughtfully, wondering what he should tell them. As far as he knew, the only thing that was being kept secret was the existence of the spirit world and by extension Naruto's status as a shaman. Everything else, his adoption by the Asakura clan and his engagement to Anna, wasn't confidential. But then it wasn't really his place to be telling the private life of his student to others. "Her name is Anna Kyoyama. My team and I did a mission to help her move in here and fix the place up a little not too long ago," Kakashi answered, giving Asuma and Kurenai some information. Not the entire truth, but enough that they could draw their own conclusions out of it. Asuma and Kurenai nodded their heads in understanding. Anna met Team 7 during their mission, so she would be interested about their participation and advancement in the exams. It also explained how Kakashi knew the blonde-haired girl. "And it's just her and that attendant living here?" Asuma questioned, taking a quick look around as he shivered a small bit. He didn't know why, but that woman creeped him out a fair bit. "Place seems fairly big for just her," he commented. "Not to mention having a girl of 12, 13 run it. Ino wouldn't be able to do that," Asuma stated, helping at her parents' flower shop notwithstanding. With Kakashi and Kurenai agreeing after a moment of thought about their own female students. Though the reasons why were vastly different. "Well, it is an inn," Kakashi pointed out blandly, getting a sheepish look from Asuma and an amused one from Kurenai. "And Anna is very mature for her age. But what about her parents?" Kurenai asked. "Where are they in all this?" "I honestly don't know," Kakashi freely admitted. "I know that she was taken in by the family that owned this inn and she is arranged to marry their heir," he said, giving them a tidbit of more information. Kurenai eyebrow was furrowed as her nose scrunched up in distaste at a girl so young being arranged to marry whoever this family's heir was. While she was not a girly girl and a proud and serious kunoichi, unlike Fang IRLs that seemed to pop up every generation, she still disliked the idea of arranged marriages. At the very least, she believed that two people should marry out of love, not because they were arranged by their family. Especially since it looked like they were marrying their heir to a savvy young woman smart enough to run an inn by herself, probably because their heir was incapable of taking care of himself. Kakashi caught the look that appeared on Kurenai's face and could pretty much guess what she was thinking. Chuckling a bit, just imagining how Anna would react to the thoughts that were surely going through Kurenai's mind. He tried to dissuade Kurenai from thinking the worst. "Now don't get any wrong ideas," he told her. "This engagement is something that Anna is definitely for and is obviously in love with her fiancé. And she has said as much." Kurenai inquired, not sounding all that convinced. "Not in words," Kakashi admitted, "but in her actions whenever there is something to do with him," the gray-haired Junin said, sounding almost fond. By first impressions, that girl didn't exactly come across as the sweet and loving type Kakashi. Asuma pointed out. "Maybe not, but I didn't even need to know her long to know her feelings are stronger and more genuine than any other girl her age," Kakashi argued. "I don't know about that, Kakashi," Kurenai countered, but didn't go into detail as she thought about her female student and her feelings for a certain whisker-marked blonde shinobi. "Well, not that the love lives of teenagers isn't highly fascinating," Asuma said with sarcasm dripping off every word. "How do you think our teams will do in the second exam?" he asked, genuinely curious and thus changing the topic of conversation. Looking up from his paperwork at a knock at High's door, Sarutobi was pleasantly surprised to see Anna entering his office. "Miss Anna, how nice of you to visit." Sarutobi greeted his surrogate grandson's fiancé warmly. "Hello, Hokage-sama." Anna Ritu. RNED, the greeting, moving to stand in front of Sarutobi's desk. "There is no need to be so formal," Sarutobi told the Idiko with a gentle smile. While he seriously doubted Anna would ever call him old man as Naruto, and even Konohamaru was so fond of doing, he at least hoped Anna wouldn't address him by his title. Was it so wrong of him to want at least one of his grandchildren, surrogate and or by marriage, to call him grandfather or grandpa? "For this conversation it would probably be best if I kept things formal, Hokage-sama," Anna replied seriously. Hiruzen sat up a bit straighter in his chair as he took note of the serious look in Anna's eyes and her voice. Signaling his Anbu to bring Anna a chair, he dismissed them right after having a feeling this conversation needed to be private. Aft, securing his office, Sarutobi turned his full attention to Anna, leaning forward slightly and his gaze hard as steel. What did you wish to discuss, Miss Anna? The third questioned. Anyone sitting across the professor and god of shinobi would be feeling some type of apprehension, yet Anna stared back at Hiruzen unflinchingly. It's about Naruto's parents, or rather who they were. She told him. If Sarutobi had been serious before now, he was absolutely grim as he stared at the girl. After a few seconds of tense silence, Sarutobi let out a heavy sigh before slumping back in his chair. I assume that Yome and Kino told you about their identities. Hiruzen guessed, Naruto's parentage being one of the things he told them that night years ago. In response, Anna nodded her head, drawing another sigh from Hiruzen. If you know, does Naruto? He asked, feeling surprised when Anna shook her head as he didn't think she would ever keep anything from Naruto. Especially something so important. Why? Sarutobi wondered curiously. I told him I might know who they were. Anna admitted. But I couldn't tell him until I figured something out. And he just accepted that. The third inquired with a raised eyebrow. Naruto trusts me. Anna replied simply. If there is something that I can't tell him, he trusts that it is for a good reason. That is an important quality between spouses. Trust. Sarutobi pointed out with a bit of levity to his voice. And what exactly was it that you needed to confirm? The reason you're keeping their identities from Naruto. Anna said bluntly. And if you don't have a good enough reason, I will tell Naruto who his parents are. She claimed unafraid. Sarutobi let out another sigh, his third since this meeting started in only a couple of minutes, as he felt his age. He could threaten the girl to keep her silence, use his position as Hokage and order her to, but he doubted that any of that would be enough to dissuade Anna if she was determined in her decision. She didn't care about any of that. In her mind, Naruto would always come first. While they were alive, Minato and Kushina made many enemies, Minato especially. Sarutobi began. Even 12 years after their deaths, there are plenty of people who would wish to exact revenge on them by any means. Killing their only son would be the perfect form of revenge in their eyes. And the cage of the saint. Wrongest shinobi village in the entire elemental nations can't protect one child. Anna questioned with a trace of disbelief and anger lacing her voice. And for the girl, that voice was always so composed, it was especially telling. You have a literal army at your disposal. Most of who also hold some resentment against Naruto in one form or another. Hiruzen said with a weary sigh. I know how it must seem. But Minato and Kushina's enemies aren't limited to the people from other villages. There are plenty of people within Konoha's walls who would love to get their hands on Naruto. Sarutobi CL aimed addressing the first part of Anna's incredulity. Revealing his parentage would only add a new danger to Naruto's life from those who would want to kill him, or take advantage of his parentage. The fact of the matter is that even without his parents' identities being revealed, I've had to stop a number of people who have tried to get close to Naruto to either use him or hurt him. I could only imagine how many more would have tried if the truth was known. And yet, despite how similar Naruto looks to his father, nobody seems to realize who they are. Anna continued to question the man. Are they really that stupid? Sarutobi broke eye contact with Anna for the first time, as he looked down at his desk. In his eyes, Anna could see guilt, sorrow, and even anger pooling in his black orbs. She was sure that if she tried, she would find similar sentiments whirling around in his head. It was a couple of minutes before Sarutobi turned so that he was looking out his window to stare out at Konoha. The best of people comes out during a time of tragedy. It brings everyone together. But it also brings out the worst in them. The Kyuubi attack 12 years ago is the worst tragedy to date in Konoha's history. Many people lost loved ones that night. Sarutobi said sorrowfully as an image of his dearly departed wife flashed through his mind. Leaving them stricken with grief which quickly turned to rage. All of which was directed at the sole and most prominent reminder of that night. Anna held her tongue, refraining from letting the old Hokage know what she thought of that. A pained expression crossed Sarutobi's face as his thoughts drifted to the various tragedies that had come to pass that night. At his darkest hour, Sarutobi was ashamed to admit that for a split second he held so much hatred towards Naruto for the loss of his wife, for however brief the moment might have been. But the villagers can't see what's right in front of them because they don't want to. They'd rather lie to themselves to justify their feelings and actions of anger and resentment towards Naruto, and they will continue to lie to themselves rather than acknowledge the horrors that they committed against him. They repeat the lie over and over until they've come to believe it. Hiruzen paused to allow himself a moment to recompose himself before continuing. I could stand on top of this building rig now and shout to the entire village the identity of Naruto's parents, and a majority would refuse to accept the truth. It doesn't matter if the villagers acknowledge that Naruto is his parents' son. What matters is that Naruto knows who they are. Anna refuted. Not if it endangers his life. Sarutobi countered steely. I swore when Minato and Kushina died that I would protect their son. I may not have always been able to live up to that promise, but I will not allow anything to happen that will endanger Naruto's life further. Anna narrowed her eyes at the man refusing to back down, having come to a decision in her mind. Naruto is a shinobi, a shaman, and the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. His life will always be in danger. Anna declared, standing up from her seat. If Naruto needs to grow stronger in order to protect himself from his parents' enemies, then he will get stronger. Because, if you like it or not, someday the truth of his parentage will come out and Naruto will have no choice but to be ready for everything that entails when it happens. She finished turning and exiting the room. Left by himself, Sarutobi grabbed his pipe, lighted it, and proceeded to take a draw from it as he leaned back in his chair, turning to face the village. His talk with Anna had dredged up his shortcomings in regards to Naruto. Something that was always unpleasant whenever Sarutobi thought about it, which unfortunately happened often enough. Sarutobi was sure that his reasonings for keeping Naruto's parents' identity from the boy was not enough for Anna. He didn't need to be a minute reader to see how dissatisfied the blonde-haired girl was through their entire conversation. So now it was a matter of if but rather when Anna would tell Naruto the truth. I just hope it doesn't turn out to be a mistake. Hiruzen thought sorrowfully to himself. If he had been wrong, then it was one more way that he had failed Naruto. Walking through Konoha, Anna thought over her conversation with Sarutobi. While the Hokage honestly thought that he had made the best possible decision when he initially decided not to tell Naruto about his parents, she doubted that that was still true. Before, Naruto had been a baby, then a child. But that was no longer the case. Naruto was a full-fledged shinobi now, with all the responsibilities and privileges that entailed. Every day he grew stronger, by leaps and bounds, both as a shinobi and as a shaman. And while Naruto might not be the sharpest kunai in the kunai pouch, Anna was making strides to amend that. And if there was something that went over his head, Anna fully intended to be there to help him or knock some literal sense into him if necessary. Naruto was no longer a child that couldn't defend himself. Anna knew that Sarutobi only had the best of intentions for Naruto in mind. But the fact of the matter was that Sarutobi was blinded by how close he actually was to Naruto. Probably still seeing the child he strove so hard to protect for so long. Anna couldn't fault him for that. The man was only human after all and loved Naruto like he would his own flesh and blood grandson. Anna did agree that Naruto had to grow far stronger before he could possibly be publicly recognized as his parents' son. That didn't mean that he wasn't ready to learn who they were. Naruto had kept secret the existence of spirits for years, and now that he was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, what was more secret in the grand scheme of things? Anna. A male voice called out to the Itako, drawing her attention to find Iruka walking toward her with a smile on his face. What a pleasant surprise, how are you? He greeted. I'm fine, Anna answered with a raised eyebrow as she stared back at the scarred man. Aren't you supposed to be at the academy right now teaching a class? She asked him. Iruka scratched at the bridge of his nose. I have an assistant taking care of the class at the moment. He replied. Taking a break? Anna continued to question the man, an accusatory tone to her voice. No, nothing like that. Iruka denied, waving his hands in front of his face. I'm actually on my way to get Konohamaru and his friends. They reassigned to interview a few of the genin that are taking part in the Chunin exams for the academy paper. He explained before a large grin spread across his face. By the way, I heard that Naruto passed the first test. The academy teacher said. Yeah, Anna confirmed with a nod of her head. Kakashi came by the inn earlier and told me. Haruka nodded with a large smile still present. We should go get some ramen to celebrate. Haruka offered enthusiastically. Seeing how eager the man was to go get ramen to celebrate Naruto passing the first test, Anna guessed that Haruka was an enabler for Naruto's addiction to ramen. Do you really have time for that? Aren't you supposed to be getting the brat and his friends? The Itako questioned him. Haruka scratched the back of his head. Yeah, but I can afford to spare a little time. Haruka reasoned before continuing. Besides, it'd be nice to spend some time with my surrogate little brother's fiancé. He claimed honestly. Fine, Anna relented after a couple of seconds of thought. Kind of hard to refuse now. She stated with Haruka's smile turning a little sheepish. Ellipsis. Anna found herself sitting next to Haruka listening as he and the Ichirakus told stories of when Naruto was younger, a bowl of ramen sitting in front of her. A faint smile danced across her face. Anna found herself treasuring these moments. She treasured the moments that she got to spend with Naruto whenever he got a chance to visit. Getting a chance to hear stories about Naruto, ones he would have been too embarrassed to tell her, meant just as much to her. Ayame stopped, laughing at one of Haruka's stories about Naruto and turned her attention to Anna. So, Anna, the older girl began leaning on the counter with a glint in her eyes. You've been here a few weeks, what kind of dates has Naruto taken you on? She asked eagerly. He hasn't. Anna answered, getting a dumbfounded look from Ayame, which quickly turned to one of annoyance. Chuki had a displeased frown and his face, crossing his arms in front of him while Haruka had his face in one of his hands and shaking it disbelievingly. That boy, Chuki muttered. I'm going to have to give him a stern talking to about not taking you for granted. The man commented, drawing silent nods of agreement from Haruka and Ayame. Anna nearly rolled her eyes but managed to restrain herself. I'm just curious, but which of you talked with Naruto about dating? Anna asked them offhandedly, getting stupefied looks from the others. They then shared a look, trying to determine if any one of them could answer Anna's question. It only took a moment for them to realize that none of them had actually done that. Anna didn't need to read their minds to know what conclusion they had all come to. She could easily tell by the looks on their faces. It's not like we've had many opportunities between the training I put him through and his missions to go on any dates. Anna stated. But are you really okay with this? Ayame asked her. For a moment Anna was silent before answering. I've known Naruto since we were 6, Anna started with a far-off look in her eyes. Since the night we met, he's been the most important person in my life. He is the light of my life, my son. The happiest moments of my life were the times I got to spend with Naruto when he visited. But those moments were tainted with the knowledge that soon enough he would have to leave and I wouldn't get to see him again for months. She said, a look of sadness crossing her face for a moment. A small smile soon appeared, the minute changes in her expression captivating the other three. Just being able to spend every day with Naruto is amazing in itself. It doesn't matter what we're doing for now, this is more than enough. The blonde Itako claimed. Ayame found herself studying Anna closely, and while it was impossible to get a read on the girl, one thing was obvious. You really do love Naruto, don't you? While it had been in the form of a case. It was clear to be a statement as well. Ayame knew that Anna cared for Naruto, but until then Ayame couldn't believe just how much. She had been on a couple of dates, seen a few couples eat at her family's eatery. She had never seen any one of them have the same look that Anna had in her eyes at that moment. She had seen it in her father's eyes when he talked about her mother. For the umpteenth time since meeting the girl, Haruka once more thought to himself how lucky Naruto was to have someone who cared about him so much. Finishing the last of his bowl of ramen, Haruka stood up from his seat, placing some money down on the counter to pay for his meal and Anna's. Well, this has been great, but I really should get going, Haruka said. So soon? Chuki asked. Come on, how about you stay and have another bowl? The man enticed. Haruka hated to admit it, but he was actually very tempted to take Chuki up on his offer. Something that Anna easily picked up on. You shouldn't be slacking off, Anna pointed out warningly. You're supposed to set a better example for your students. Haruka dropped his head in disappointment. She has a point, the academy teacher admitted. I should really get going and retrieve Konohamaru and the others from the Forest of Death so that they can start the second test of the Chunin exams. Haruka told them, turning to leave the small diner. Forest of Death. The sound of Anna's voice caused Iruka to come to a stop and cringe at the tidbit of information that he had let slip. Turning to face her, well, Iruka wanted to say he could get a read of the blonde-haired girl, but the way she kept her face completely blank, not even facing him, would make that a lie. But even still, Iruka was sure that Anna was concerned for Naruto. Yes, Iruka confirmed, before he tried to ease her worries as best he could. I won't lie and say it's not dangerous, but I'm sure that Naruto will get through this alright. I know he will, Anna claimed calmly. Looking over at Iruka, Anna kept her expression completely even as she continued. Can you pass along a message to Naruto for me? She asked of the academy teacher. Of course, Iruka replied with a nod. Tell him not to hold back, Anna requested. Iruka gave the blonde girl a reassuring smile. Sure, Iruka agreed as he exited the ramen stand. Ayame watched Iruka leave before turning her attention to Anna. Are you really okay? Ayame asked the younger girl. Knowing that Naruto was going into somewhere called the Forest of Death had Ayame worried sick. She couldn't imagine how Anna was feeling. I'm fine, Anna insisted. Naruto will be fine, I know he will. I have faith in him. Here, Chuki said confidently. Our boy won't be beaten so easily. A small smile spread across Anna's face as she stood up from her seat. I should get going as well. Thank you for the meal, she told them. You're welcome, Ayame said with a cheerful smile. Be sure to come again real soon, alright? It was nice talking to you and getting to know you. Quote, okay, Anna easily agreed. She could tell that Ayame was being sincere, and Anna had to admit that she enjoyed talking with the older woman as well. I'll see you later, the Itako said, leaving the stand and heading back to the Flame Inn. Naruto stared into Training Ground 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death, feeling like he was being driven mad. Not long ago, Iruka had shown up in order to take Konohamaru, Udon, and Moegi back to the academy after the three students interviewed him and his teammates about the Chunin exams and the people participating in it. If it had only been that, then Naruto wouldn't have been at all troubled, but right before Iruka left he gave Naruto a message from Anna. Don't hold back. Of course, he wasn't going to hold back. Naruto had almost found himself answering. He was Naruto Uzumaki after all. He always went all out in everything he did. Holding back was a foreign concept to him and not the sort of thing he would even consider unless under extenuating circumstances. The Chunin exams certainly weren't it. The only reason that Naruto could come up with that Anna would have that message passed on was if he was telling him to use his shaman abilities during the exam. What had Naruto at the point of tearing his hair out were the doubts he had on whether he was right or wrong. If he was right, then great. If he was wrong, then he'd end up suffering Anna's wrath. He shivered at the thought. Haku looked at his friend, not sure if he should be worried or amused. For the last couple of minutes Naruto would stare into the forest, start to pace around, and then crouch down, clutching his head fearfully before the process restarted. And while it had been a little funny at first, Haku was growing concerned and people were starting to stare. Thus, Haku approached the blonde slowly, not sure how he'd react to suddenly being surprised in the state that he was in, before drawing his attention. Naruto, Haku called, almost finding himself flinching when Naruto's head snapped in his direction. With a small gulp he continued. Is something the matter? Iruka-sensei had a message from Anna. Naruto mumbled out. She said not to hold back. Oh, okay, Haku drawled with a tilt of his head. And that's a bad thing? He questioned. In the blink of an eye Naruto was suddenly in front of Haku, holding the OT. Her boy's shoulders and all but shaking him back and forth. But what does she mean by that? Naruto shouted desperately. If his brain wasn't currently being bashed against the inside of his head, Haku thought he would be highly amused by the fact that Naruto was having such a normal teenager problem. Still, with how hard Naruto was shaking him, Haku was starting to get dizzy, not to mention of people. Weren't staring before they were now with Naruto's exclamation, so Haku grabbed Naruto's arm and forced him to stop. Once he felt that wasn't about to tip over, Haku stared at Naruto and spoke softly, mostly so they wouldn't be overheard, to try and calm him down. What do you think she means? Haku questioned him. Naruto started in a shout but took a breath and quieted down at a gesture from Haku. I'm not sure, he admitted feebly. This is Anna we are talking about. Haku pointed out. She knows you. The Hyoten user pointed out. There is no one in the world that knows me better. Naruto claimed surely with a smile on his face. Haku rolled his eyes with a small smile of his own. Yes, you two are the perfect couple. Haku said calmly before continuing. What I was trying to say is that she wouldn't have a message passed on to you that she already knew that you were going to do. And if that's true, then only you know what she was really trying to say. Because I'm guessing that there is no one in the world that knows her better than you. Haku finished. Naruto nodded his head silently as he gazed back toward the forest. Anna did know him better than anyone, and if she saw it not to hold back, it was because she was telling him to use everything he knew to pass this test. After all, Anna never said that he couldn't use his shaman abilities, just that she wanted to test Hai's abilities as a shaman and shinobi without relying on Amidamaru and spirit unity. Ellipsis. Alright everyone, listen up. Enko called out, drawing everyone's attention onto herself. Now that the kiddies are gone, she said with a wave of her hand, I can officially welcome you all to the stage for the second test, Training Ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. Enko stood almost proudly in front of a tall chain link fence that separated the genin from the Forest of Death. The fence was almost entirely covered in warning signs that told anyone who approached to stay out and about the life-threatening danger that lay within. Looking past the fence, they saw trees larger than any of them, even those from Konoha, had ever seen in their lives. Even just a couple of feet in some of them. Noted the almost total lack of light, hinting how thick the canopy was. As foreboding as the forest was, it was only made worse when they all heard the roar of a very large beast. Enko found herself grinning broadly at seeing the scared shitless expressions that some of the genin sported. Naruto scoffed at the woman in her attempt to frighten them. Is that supposed to scare us? The blonde shaman mocked. Enko smirked slyly in response, and then before Naruto knew what was happening, Enko threw a kunai at him, coming close enough to draw blood from his cheek. Then in a blink of an eye, Enko appeared behind him. You know, brats like you, always acting so brave, are the ones to die first. The woman claimed, licking up Naruto's blood with her tongue, as the boy froze up. Letting out that blood I love so much, the woman said, only to trail off at the end as she drew another kunai and holding it defensively behind her. Here's your kunai. A woman with long black hair, straw hat, and a headband said, holding the kunai with an extraordinary long tongue. Enko didn't react at all as she took her kunai back. Why thank you. Enko told her with a grateful smile on her face that quickly disappeared as she stared at the other woman with a deadly look in her eyes. But you shouldn't sneak up behind me, unless you want to die. Enko warned. Apologies, the woman answered, stepping back. It's just I get a little excited when I see blood. She explained, plus you cut my precious hair, I couldn't help it. The dark-haired woman added. Blinking a couple of times, Enko proceeded to smile a little sheepishly. Oh, sorry about that. The purple-haired woman apologized, even as the other woman walked back to her team. Hey, looks like we have some real bloodthirsty participants this time around. Enko commented, mostly to herself. This should be fun. Like you're one to talk about people being bloodthirsty. Naruto thought silently, wiping away the remaining blood. A part of him was worried that Anna would hold him responsible for the way Enko pressed herself against him from behind. He could distinctively remember the feel of Enko's. No. Don't think about it. Naruto screamed in his head, furiously shaking his head. He'd be in deep shit if Anna even caught a whiff of him thinking about another woman's breasts. Haku and Sakura stared at Naruto with a deadpanned look on their faces as they saw how scared the whiskered shinobi was all of a sudden. While they didn't know why, they did know that it was because of Anna. He's so whipped, they thought simultaneously. Alright, Enko shouted, getting everyone's attention once more. Now before we start the second part of the exam, I'm going to need you all to sign some waiver forms first. The woman declared, holding up a stack of papers. Passing them on to the closest person. It's so when some of you inevitably die, Konoha, and me, won't be held responsible. Enko said with an almost too cheerful smile on her face. Quote, the second test, simply put, is the ultimate survival exercise. For the next 5 days you will survive within the confines of the forest while trying to complete the task of obtaining these 2 scrolls. Enko explained, holding up 2 scrolls for everyone to see, one having the kanji for heaven and the other earth. Half of the teams will get one and the other half will obviously get the other. To pass this test you need to reach the tower at the center of the training ground, have both scrolls, and have your entire team present. Losing a team member, not having both scrolls, showing up after the 5 days, or opening the scrolls will see you disqualified. Enko paused for a second to make sure that everyone understood before finishing up. You can exchange your forms for a scroll at the booth behind me. She ended, gesturing to the booth behind her with curtains hanging down around it obscuring everyone's view of the inside. Oh, Enko said as if she just remembered something. Once last piece of advice. Don't die. Ellipsis. For the next several minutes teams steadily turned in their forms. More than one team found themselves practically glaring at the booth trying to see through the drapes, in an attempt to catch a glimpse of what scroll other teams were receiving, only to curse with the preconceived knowledge that it was an impossible task for nearly all of them, one Hyuga in particular. AR took full advantage of the abilities his dojutsu afforded him. The members of Team 7 also stood to the side watching as some of the others' teams went to get their scroll before being led away, but like the rest couldn't see anything. Naruto though had an advantage that none of the other shinobi present possessed that could help him. Grabbing a few leaves that Naruto found lying around was inconspicuous enough. When he then just let them all float away, no one raised an eyebrow, especially when they couldn't detect any chakra coming from them, so disregarded the possibility of some type of jutsu being used almost immediately. Except again for a certain Hyuga, who while he couldn't see any chakra within the leaves that Naruto released and would have dismissed them like everyone else, cool. See how they had all drifted toward different teams. Naruto, Haku said in a whisper that only his teammates picked up on. What did you do? He asked, while he couldn't tell exactly what Naruto had done. Haku knew that the shaman had done something. Naruto gave them one of his fox-like grins. Gaining an advantage. Naruto answered vaguely. How? Sasuke demanded with a glare at once more seeing something that Naruto could do that he couldn't understand, even with his Sharingan. Don't worry about it. Naruto waved off, not feeling like he was under any sort of obligation to answer Sasuke's question. Especially since the Uchiha was so far completely unaware about the other world that Naruto was a part of. Fists clenched, Sasuke bristled with indignation at once more not being told something he wanted to know. But whatever problem he had with Naruto, and the things that he could do, Sasuke was prepared to set it aside for now so that he could focus on the second stage of the exams. Half an hour later found Team 7 were steadily making their way through the forest of death, Sasuke and Sakura in the lead with Naruto and Haku a couple steps behind them. In Sasuke's possession was the Heaven Scroll that they were given. Initially Sasuke had insisted on them moving through the trees, to try and cover as much distance as possible, only for Naruto to advise against it, saying that the advantage he had gotten them would need a little time. With Sasuke and Sakura walking ahead of them, Haku took the opportunity that presented itself to ask Naruto about what he had done. Those were Shikigami Kuni. Naruto started off. Shikigami. Haku murmured interestedly. Naruto nodded his head as he went into greater detail. I don't know everything, but from what I remember, Gramps telephone. Ling me, there are 3 different types of Shikigami. First is the Shikigami Kuni. They're usually inanimate objects that are brought to life with a shaman's furyoku, leaves and stones mostly. They are rather basic, but I can send messages through them and they carry out tasks for me. The ones I sent out were supposed to spy on the other teams and tell me which scrolls they had. Naruto revealed. Aku simply nodded his head, slightly awed by how advantageous such a technique was for spying and infiltration missions. Then there are Shikigami like Zenki and Goki, Anna's spirits, who over time grew so powerful they've developed a will of their own, making them not all that different from regular ghosts. Finally, there are the paper Shikigami. Of the 3, these Shikigami, they're the most versatile and complex. You know those helpers that you've seen around the inn? Yes, Haku answered obviously. It was kind of hard not to notice strange people walking around the inn with paper tags covering their faces. Haku would admit that he had almost attacked one the first time he ran into one. It was only the fact that nothing seemed to happen in the inn that Anna didn't know about that stayed Haku's hand. That and the fact they had been cleaning when he discovered them. They're Shikigami. The Hyoten user voiced confident that that was why Naruto brought them up. Then how? The Uzumaki Old easily guess what Haku was wondering about. Like I said, versatile and complex. Naruto said as a thoughtful look crossed his face. Think of it like comparing a genin to a jonin. The shaman too. Him drawing an understanding nod from Haku. It was a fair analogy if a little simplified, but if would suffice. Paper shikigami are normally specialized by the spiritualist known as onmyoji. Deppen. Ding what they're made for. Paper shikigamis could act as messenger birds, literally, to the more advanced sentient familiars that serve the onmyoji. Are the shikigami really that impressive? Haku questioned warily at how Naruto was going on about these paper shikigamis. Aren't they pretty much clones? From what he had seen of the shikigami serving at the inn, despite the oddity of a tag covering their face, they didn't seem all that impressive and hardly all that capable of anything besides tending to household chores. Naruto shook his head. Anna is amazing, the shaman proclaimed proudly. But even she'll admit that the paper shikigami that she creates aren't all that great. The onmyoji are supposed to have secret techniques that allow their shikigami to do things the rest of us can only imagine. Like, Haku prompted. Naruto shrugged his shoulders in response. Crazy strong animals that help you control the elements. So, they're like a mix of clones, jutsu, and summons. Haku corrected himself mentally. A couple of minutes later one of the shikigami kuni returned moving steadily across the ground, looking for all intents and purposes like a regular leaf to any normal individual, before floating up to Naruto. Haku couldn't tell, but it almost seemed like the Naruto and the shikigami were holding a conversation with one another. Whatever was being shared between the two. Naruto ended up nodding his head before the shikigami floated off once more. Turning to face Haku, Naruto had a mischievous smile on his face that bordered on predatory. We have a target. Ellipsis. Looking down at a couple of aim nin. Haku had to say that he was rather unimpressed. A few minutes ago, the third member of the AIM team had tried to catch Naruto off guard when the blonde genin had taken a bathroom break. And while that might have worked in another life, in this life, he was the one that ended up getting ambushed by one of Naruto's clones, with Haku providing backup in case it was needed. When presented with their captured opponent, Sasuke and Sakura at first questioned how Naruto knew he was there, but quickly brushed off their questions when Haku pointed out that if they could CK down the AIM nin's teammates, they'd have a significant advantage over them. Nothing more really needed to be said. So, after a few minutes of making it look like Naruto didn't know where the two remaining members of the AIM team were, and having it look like Haku was tracking them down from what little information they got from the one they captured, they eventually came upon the pair, both clearly antsy from how they were fidgeting. What now? Sakura asked in a whisper as she and her team kept their eyes trained on the pair of foreign shinobi. They had the obvious advantage being 4 on 2 plus the element of surprise on their side, so the Pinkett was wondering how they would proceed. I think I can hit both with my Senbon from here and knock them out. Haku supplied, drawing the needle-like weapon. Sasuke's gaze shifted to the other black-haired teen with an eyebrow raised. You think? He questioned. Haku nodded his head admittedly. There is a chance that I could miss and fail to make them fall unconscious. Haku said in an attempt to be humble, but well aware that it was very unlikely that he'd actually miss. Turning his attention back to the unaware pair, Sasuke ran the information through his head. A light, we'll go with that. Sasuke decided. If one of them happens to remain conscious, then Naruto, Sakura, and I will engage him, and Haku can provide backup. Since we're the only team in the exams with a 4-person unit, it will probably take him a moment to realize that Haku's missing, giving us another opening if we need it. Sasuke strategized, getting nods from others as they accepted the Uchiha's plan. Not even a minute later. Well, that was disappointing. Naruto muttered as he kicked one of the unconscious shinobis in their side, let down by how anticlimactic things turned out. Turns out just because they were shinobi it didn't guarantee an epic fight. And a waste of time. Sasuke grunted, having searched for the enemy team's scroll, and while he might have found it, he was frustrated to find a copy of the scroll they already had in their possession. The Uchiha was about to toss it when he was stopped by Haku. Hold on, Sasuke. Haku called, taking the scroll from the Uchiha before the teen could throw it away. It's not a bad idea to have a spare, the black-haired teen commented. With a grunt, Sasuke wordlessly agreed with Haku's reasoning as he tossed the other raven-haired boy the extra scroll to keep safe. We should keep heading toward the tower. The Uchiha decided. Haku spared Naruto a glance, catching his attention. The blonde shinobi shrugged his shoulders. Until one of the other Shikigami that he sent out contacted him, it ultimately didn't matter what they did, and then once one does, they can again discuss what they were going to do. As they traversed through the forest, the members of Team 7 made sure to keep their guard up in case one of the other teams tried to ambush them. That's why when gale force winds started raging through the area that they were standing, it caught them all by surprise. For a moment Haku lost sight of his teammates as he tried to anchor himself against the clearly jutsu-created winds. With chakra applied to his feet to keep him from being blown further away, the Hyoten user created a pillar of ice to act as a barrier against the gales. When the winds finally did die down, Haku vigilantly stepped out from behind the ice pillar in case the enemy was nearby and tried to attack before beginning to search for his missing teammates. Ellipsis. Naruto found himself in the unfortunate position of having been standing at the center of where the torrent of air was passing through, so he ended up being blasted farther away than the rest of his teammates. He wasn't sure how far he went, but when he finally come to a stop, Naruto couldn't find any of his teammates. Unfortunately, what he did find was the largest snake that he'd ever seen, with its fangs bared ready to swallow him whole. The blonde shaman stared up at the giant snake dryly. He started only to be cut off when the snake descended on him. Ellipsis. Sasuke wasn't sure if he should be considered fortunate or unfortunate. Because while he had been separated from the others by some cruel twist of fate, he somehow still got stuck with Sakura, though she had been elated by the turn of events despite the circumstances. While the pink-haired Kunoichi had her strengths that she excelled at, Sasuke didn't think that any of them could be applied to a survival exam within the infamous Forest of Death, making her the last person amongst his teammates that he would want to get stuck with. Well, it might be a toss-up between her and Naruto. The Uchiha's silent contemplation on who he would rather not be stuck with came to an abrupt end when Somio Ne appeared before him and Sakura, causing both of them to draw a kunai in case they had to defend themselves. Haku? Sakura asked, lowering her kunai once she realized that the person was her other raven-haired teammate. Don't move, Sasuke ordered the Hyoten user, as unlike Sakura he didn't lower his guard the slightest in case the person standing in front of them turned out to be an imposter. What's the password? He demanded, glad that they had thought to set it up on the off chance they separated as they had been. How about this instead? Haku offered, raising one of his hands palm up, Sasuke and Sakura tensing in response. As a small ice sculpture started to form in the palm of his hand. It took a couple of seconds, but eventually Sakura and Sasuke recognized that the sculpture was Zabuza with Kubikiribocho strapped to his back, looking like he was about to perform the hidden mist jutsu. Is that proof enough? He asked, even though he was annoyed that Haku hadn't used the password that they agreed upon. Sasuke nodded acceptingly. Even if someone could replicate Haku's Hyoten Kekkei Genkai, his connection with Zabuza was limited to very few people outside of Team 7. Your turn, Haku stated, the gentle smile he wore on finding his teammates disappearing as his expression became cold, the sculpture in his hand shattering and reforming into a trio of ice needles. Sasuke and Sakura tensed at Haku's sudden change in demeanor, having flashbacks to when they faced him on the bridge. Instinctively Sasuke activated his Sharingan in preparation for the fight he perceived was coming. Haku, though, on seeing Sasuke's eyes turn red, nodded his head in approval before turning his focus to Sakura, thinking of a question that he could ask the girl that no one besides they could know. It's Sakura, Sasuke claimed, having noticed how Haku focused his attention on Sakura. We were together from the start. Sasuke might not have known it, and certainly didn't mean for it to happen, his words pretty much caused Sakura's mind to turn to mush as steam came out of her ears. Haku once more nodded his head, an amused smile on his face, noticing the state that Sakura was in. Then we just need to find Naruto, Haku said, doing a quick sweep of the surrounding area to see if he could spot their remaining teammate. A few minutes later Naruto did show up with a sheepish grin on his face. Yo, the blonde greeted. I'm glad you're all alright, he said earnestly, walking closer to his team. A second later the blonde shaman had to jump back in order to avoid having his feet impaled by Haku's ice Senbon. What the hell, Haku? Naruto demanded. You could have cut off one of my toes. Don't take another step. Haku warned, already having created more Senbon. He wasn't sure how Haku felt that there was something different about the Naruto that was standing in front of them. Naruto stared at Haku, his face scrunched up in confusion before a look of understanding crossed his eyes. "Oh, right," he said as realization struck him on why everyone was being so cautious. "The password. Well, go ahead and ask the question," Naruto told them. Sasuke and Sakura looked toward Haku Yuli, expecting the Hyoten user to come up with a question completely different from their prearranged one. Keeping a careful eye on Naruto, still unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right, Haku nodded his head nonetheless. "Who is Amidamaru?" Naruto stopped with his mouth already ready to recite the password back when Haku's question brought him up short. Blinking a couple of times the question registered in his mind. Naruto tilted his head in confusion. "Amidamaru?" he questioned. "Answer," Haku demanded, creating a few more ice needles in the air around him to emphasize his point. While she was concerned by how hostile Haku was treating Naruto, Sakura made sure that she was on guard in case the person standing in front of her turned out not to be her teammate. Sasuke didn't have as many qualms as Sakura, perfectly understanding why they needed to be careful and more than prepared to act if it proved necessary. The blonde shinobi let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," Naruto relented. Amidamaru was a samurai who was alive 600 years ago. He was a traitor and killed. At hearing his answer, the members of Team 7 eyes widened, Haku acting first as he sent the Senbon that he Edid flying toward the fake, flaring his chakra, causing the temperature around him to start dropping. With a far too cruel smirk on his face, the person posing as Naruto jumped away from Haku's attack, landing safely several feet away. "Oh." The fake Naruto spoke before dispelling his transformation. In the place of where Naruto stood was a person that would hard to describe as either male or female, with long black hair, dark eyes, and ashen tanned skin. Their clothing and headband identified them as a shinobi of Kusagaku. Furthermore, the present members of Team 7 recognized them as the person who managed to sneak in on the proctor earlier. "What gave me away?" they asked curiously. There were two possible answers that Naruto could have given. Haku answered, a single hand raised with a half-ram seal. "That wasn't either of them." "Kukuku, really now?" The shinobi chuckled. "And you're not going to reveal what the correct answers are? Clever. Then the false password for any enemies that might be listening in, very clever," he said, his focus fixated on the two raven-haired shinobis, a hungry look in his eyes. The Kusanin held his arm up to reveal his scroll, relishing in the way the genin's eyes all trained on it once it came into view, like puppies whose master was holding up a treat. "I believe this is what you want, right? My Earth Scroll." Without waiting for a response, the shinobi stretched its mouth open wide, its tongue wrapping around the scroll, before swallowing it whole, not unlike a snake. "Now then, let's begin the battle for each other's scrolls. With our lives on the line." There was no sign or warning for the members of Team 7 before they felt like a tsunami crashed into them at the killing intent released by the Kusanin. Sasuke and Sakura were brought to their knees instantly, their eyes wide and horror-filled at seeing their own deaths. Haku was doing only so much better, having been able to stay on his feet, yet any pretense of the offense he had mounting had been wiped away. This key, Haku thought, a single bead of sweat running down his face as his hands trembled slightly. It is far stronger than even Zabuza-sama's ki. While he was being trained by Zabuza, the former Kiri-nin would constantly subjugate Haku to his ki as a way for Hyoten to grow a resistance to it when facing other shinobi. Yet even Zabuza's worst seemed pale in comparison to what this shinobi was releasing. Looking at the Kusanin, Haku could see the amusement clearly evident in their eyes as he stared down at Sakura and Sasuke, and a hint of respect in them when his attention turned to him. Even still, Haku knew if he didn't act, then the Kusanin would kill them all for real. He didn't have to wait long as the ninja drew 3 kunai before, almost lazily, flicking them at the genin. Haku would never be able to say, but whether it was his survival instincts or by some sort of divine intervention, he found himself dodging the thrown kunai. From the corner of his eye, Haku saw that Sasuke had managed to get himself and Sakura out of the way, though the bloody kunai in his hand and the blood stain on his shorts indicated that the Uchiha didn't have as easy a time as he did. Setting aside Sasuke's condition for the moment, Haku turned his attention back to the enemy shinobi. They weren't moving to pursue, but Haku wasn't willing to leave that up to chance. Going through a set of hand seals, Haku created as many ice needles as he could out of the moisture in the air before directing them at the Kusa-nin. It might only buy them a few more seconds, but in this instance every second counted. Ellipsis. We need to find Naruto and keep moving. Haku muttered lowly, keeping a lookout for the Kusa-nin as Sakura tended to Sasuke's injured leg. But we have to be careful, that guy is. Watch out. Sakura's scream came out just as Haku's danger senses went off, causing the Noirette to jump away. Looking back to see what had caused such a reaction from him and Sakura, Haku spotted a large snake right where the three of them had been moments before. The Hyoten user didn't have time to wonder how such a large animal was able to sneak up on all of them without having drawn their notice long before, as Sasuke seemed to go mad at the sight of the snake. Get away! The Uchiha shouted in near hysteria, throwing kunai and shuriken at the beast so that it ended up impaled on the side of a tree. Haku couldn't exactly fault Sasuke for his overreaction given what he had just experienced. Any other thoughts he had on the matter were wiped from Haku's mind as he watched the disturbing scene of the Kusa-nin emerging from the pierced snake's body. You shouldn't relax for even a moment. The Kusa-nin spoke, drenched in the dead snake's bodily fluids. Pray should I always be trying to run away, in the presence of a predator that is. The long-haired enemy shinobi finished, his long tongue hanging out of his face. Haku didn't let the thing, because even he couldn't tell if the person standing in front of them was supposed to be a man or a woman, continue to taunt them. Secret Jutsu, 1,000 Needles of Death. With a single hand Haku performed the seal's necessary for Jutsu to summon thousands of needles made of water and surround the Kusa-nin. They only hung in the air for a moment before they were all launched at the shinobi. Faster than they though. Possible Team 7 watched the Kusa-nin coil around the tree, much like a snake, and launch himself out of the path of the Senbanin straight toward Sasuke. Haku and Sasuke were barely able to keep up with the Kusa-nin's movements. Haku because of his own speed and Sasuke thanks to his Sharingan, yet both were painfully aware that neither of them would be able to do anything before the enemy reached Sasuke. The predatory smile that the Kusa-nin wore grew more sinister when he was close enough to the Uchiha to see the young teen's eyes widen upon realizing he was only a couple feet away from him. For a split second though his attention was drawn away from the Uchiha as a single leaf fell before him, almost as if in slow motion. In the next instant it felt like something was slamming onto him from above, pinning his body and completely obscuring his vision. As dumbfounded as the members of Team 7 were by what they were witnessing, what could only be described as a waterfall of leaves falling onto the ninja, Sasuke still had enough sense to take this opportunity to put some much-needed distance between his opponent and himself. How do you like that? A voice called out, looking up Haku, Sasuke. And Sakura saw Naruto standing on a tree branch far above with more than a few clones surrounding him. Although Naruto looked fine, they couldn't miss the fact that his clothes were wet. His hair was a little matted down, leaving them to wonder what had happened to the blonde. I call it Naruto Uzumaki's secret jutsu, Leaf Storm. The blonde shaman claimed proudly. Cool, huh? Kukuku, indeed. That was quite the interesting jutsu. The Kusa-nin said smoothly, causing the others to tense at the sound of his voice. Literally stepping out of a tree, the man-woman had their eyes trained on the Uzumaki. His gaze equal parts interested and hungry, causing a shiver to go down Naruto's spine. He had barely been able to avoid the blonde's surprise attack with substitution. The fact that such a jutsu had gotten so close to him without being aware of it was what really caught his interest. He watched as the leaves rose up off a large clump of dirt to encircle Naruto and his clones, his keen eyes noticing how the clones were wavering a little. If he didn't know better, he would think that they were unstable. The fact that the boy was able to create them at all should mean that is impossible. The Kusa-nin thought to himself. And yet, what he was seeing before his very eyes was telling him something very different. Naruto wore a cocksure grin as he stared down his opponent doing a splendid job of masking his thoughts. The Shikigami Kuni were excellent as a means of gathering information, much like the shadow clones, at least as far as Naruto was concerned. Because unlike his grandfather, Yomei, Naruto couldn't use the Shikigami Kuni in a battle efficiently, not without the help of his clones. Unfortunately, as he was just finding out, the continued use of Furioku caused his clones to dispel due to their chakra being imbalanced. Though right now Naruto couldn't afford to be distracted, especially in front of an opponent that seemed to be giving Haku and Sasuke trouble. Naruto knew next to nothing of the enemy that his team was facing, but even so all his instincts were telling the blonde shinobi shaman that he was very dangerous. With the reprieve that Naruto's sudden appearance caused, Sasuke had enough time to regain his composure and think things through thoroughly, and, as much as he hated to admit it, Sasuke knew that there was only one way to escape this. Stepping forward drew everyone's attention onto himself. His teammates though were befuddled when he suddenly turned off his Sharingan. "This is what you want, right?" Sasuke asked, holding up the heaven scroll. "I'll give you the scroll. Please take it and leave us alone." Despite how much it might hurt his pride to ask for mercy, because Uchihas do not beg, Sasuke was more than willing to bear it if it meant escaping. Naruto bristled at Sasuke's offer as he proceeded to glare at the last Uchiha. Already having a spare heaven scroll, Naruto knew that it didn't really matter if Sasuke bartered one away. But to see his rival give up without a fight pissed the Uzumaki off more than he thought possible. "What the hell, Sasuke?" Naruto shouted at the raven-haired shinobi. "Why would you just give him the scroll like that?" he demanded, glaring at the Uchiha who shot a glare of his own back at Naruto. "I see," the long-haired Kusa-nin murmured, eyeing the scroll. "The only way for prey to escape a predator is to offer the predator a different meal." They reasoned with a smirk. "Just take it," Sasuke grumbled, tossing the scroll at him. Yet before it could reach the Kusa-nin, Naruto snatched the scroll out of midair, landing beside Sasuke. For a second Sasuke wore a look of surprise before morphing to one of anger. "You idiot! What are you doing? Do you even understand the situation we're in?" Sasuke shouted in an utter rage. With the scroll held firmly in his hand, Naruto spun, landing a punch across Sasuke's face, surprising everyone there, which resulted in the Uchiha falling on his ass. "I admit that I forgot that stupid code word of yours," Naruto started off. "So, I can't test it, but you're just some fake pretending to be Sasuke, right?" he said doubtfully with a glare directed at Sasuke. "You total moron," Sasuke answered darkly. "I'm the real Sasuke." "Yeah, right," Naruto countered defiantly. "There is no way that a coward like you is the Sasuke I know. Besides, Naruto continued, turning his attention from Sasuke and back to the Kusa-nin. "You're so freaked by this guy, you're the one who doesn't understand what's going on," the blonde shaman claimed. "If this guy's so strong, what's stopping him from just taking the scroll? Or even that he won't go back on his word?" "Kukuku," the Kusa-nin started laughing. "It's just as you said, Naruto. It would be just as sigh for me," Kusa-nin said, pulling back the sleeve on his left hand to reveal a ceiling tattoo. "To kill you all and take the scroll." He finished biting this thumb hard enough to draw blood before wiping it across the seal. The members of Team 7 became tense as a giant cloud of smoke momentarily obscured the long-haired enemy shinobi from their sight. Though when the smoke cleared, they weren't feeling much better as the dispersed smoke revealed the Kusa-nin standing on the largest snake 3/4 of Team 7 had ever seen. "I hate snakes," Naruto muttered in a deadpan. He already had go through the horror of being eaten by a snake once today. Luckily, he had a less than natural way of getting himself out, though he still ended covered in snake guts, and he wasn't looking to relive the experience. "Charge!" Naruto ordered as he pointed at the snake. From where he previously stood, Naruto's remaining shadow clones gave the same order, the Shikigami Kuni diving down toward the Kusa-nin and his summon. The Kusa-nin stared at the approaching tree leaves intently, even as he weaved through a few seals before bringing a single hand up to his mouth and unleashing a ball of fire. As the fireball raced toward the dead tree leaves, the long black-haired enemy shinobi watched as the leaves came to abrupt halt before they tried to get out of the way of the incoming attack, only for a majority of them to be consumed by the flames. So, focused as he was on the Uzumaki's strange jutsu, he was actually caught by surprise when his summon suddenly moved, though he quickly recovered. Looking back, the Kusa-nin could see some ice spikes piercing through the tree where his summon had been just a second ago. Along with that, he could see some frost having built up along the snake's body. His examination was cut short when he sensed someone appear behind him. Turning around, he raised his arm in time to block a punch from Haku. "Quite the fast one, isn't he?" the Kusa-nin mused to him. His gaze fixed on his arm, watching as ice started to build up at the point of contact. Throwing a punch aimed at Haku in retaliation. The enemy shinobi watched as ice slowly formed between his punch and the ice user is an impediment only for his fist to break through it easily enough and land a hit across Haku's face. Not a second later the Kusa-nin spun around to block another attack. More than a little surprised to find the blade of a Bakken held firmly in his hand. With a raised brow the Kusa-nin turned their gaze from the Bakken to Naruto. "And what did you plan to do with this?" the shinobi questioned with a smirk. A growl reverberated from the back of Naruto's throat as he tried to force the Bakken closer, hating the smug look the black-haired ninja sported and wishing for nothing more than to wipe it off their face. Taking one hand Naruto placed it against the back of the blade in an effort to force it closer to his enemy's face. As his anger spiked Naruto's features slowly changed, his eyes turning crimson with slit pupils, his whisker marks thickened and hair became shaggier, and his nails sharpened until they looked more like claws. The Kusa-nin watched this all from up close, their eyes widening in realization. They murmured, the smirk that seemed to be permanently on their face widening. Naruto didn't give the man a chance to finish his thought as, in his anger, he channeled Furyoku and chakra into the Bakken. With a loud yell Naruto broke the standoff as he unleashed all the gathered chakra and Furyoku at once in a wide explosion of purple energy. A moment later the Kusa-nin jumped away from the epicenter of the attack, his clothes visibly damaged. His summon wasn't so fortunate as it suffered the full onslaught before it dispelled. Landing on a branch a fair distance away from the blonde shaman, the Kusa-nin raised their head to reveal that their clothes weren't the only thing to be damaged by Naruto's attack. Their face had been torn, revealing what could only be pale white skin underneath, while in other places it hung almost loosely, as if it had suddenly grown to the point it no longer fit on their head properly. What's more, his eyes was no longer black, instead it was a sickly yellow with a slit pupil. At that moment one thing was made abundantly clear to the members of Team 7, they had absolutely no idea who it was that they were facing. Team 7 was further unnerved when the black-haired Kusa-nin started to chuckle lowly before losing all semblance of control. Kukuku, ha 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 ha. Eventually the shinobi regained control over themselves. A hand that had been covering their face as they laughed, brushing back a few strands of hair that had fallen forward, his eyes dancing with delight. This team has turned out to be a real treasure trove of rare gems. The Kusa-nin mused slyly. Konoha's last Uchiha, he started staring at Sasuke before looking over at Haku. Quite possibly the last wielder of the Hyoten Kekkei Genkei, then to Naruto. And impossibly enough the first ever shinobi to have access to the spirit world. Tell me, boy, exactly what kind of spirit practitioner are you? Finally, they set their sight on Sakura, causing the pink-haired Kunoichi to flinch. It makes me curious to see what hidden talents you possess. Sakura felt her body lock in place, her eyes widening fearfully, feeling very much like prey being stared down by a predator. Sakura didn't know what she would do if this monster decided to go after her, to see what talents she possessed. Yet before panic could completely set in, a cloud of leaves rose up around her, placing itself between her and the Kusa-nin, and while she was a little confused by the strange event, Sakura did know who was responsible. Naruto. Having come to the same conclusion, the black-haired Kusa-nin turned their gaze to Naruto. Staring at his opponent with a defiant look in his eyes, Naruto had his Bakken pointed straight at them. "I won't let you lay a single finger on Sakura," he avowed. "So confident, aren't we?" The Kusa-nin mused. "Let's see if you can back that up." They finished launching himself at Naruto. Sakura watched silently as Kusa-nin went after her orange-clad teammate, the leaves chasing after them, and she could even spot Haku moving to support Naruto. Seeing the two doing their best to hold their own against the made Sakura realize that Sasuke hadn't done anything in all this time. Looking toward the raven-haired Uchiha, she saw him just standing there watching, without even his Sharingan activated. With and a hint of trepidation, Sakura took a single step toward Sasuke before her gaze immediately shifted toward the battle happening not that far away from her, half expecting the Kusa-nin to suddenly be bearing down on her. Only to sigh in relief when she saw that she was in the clear. Eventually Sakura reached the lone Uchiha, after moving as quickly as she dared without drawing attention to herself. Approaching him tentatively as to not startle him. Sasuke. She called to him softly. "Idiots, they're both idiots." Sasuke muttered under his breath, yet loud enough for Sakura to hear him. As he glared at the battle that was happening before him. Don't they understand that we have no chance of beating this guy? Sakura wasn't sure what it was, but the Sasuke standing before her looked different from the one she knew, that it wasn't almost like she was staring at a stranger. It took a second, but she finally realized what it was. Fear. Sasuke Uchiha, the last loyal Uchiha in Konohagakure, child prodigy. And Rookie of the Year, was afraid. If nothing else completely shook Sakura's perception of the world to its very core, then to see Sasuke as he was now definitely accomplished that. The last Uchiha might later try to make the argument that he was only being pragmatic, but Sakura could clearly see the truth for what it was. In a matter of minutes, the Kusanin had managed to early cow Sasuke to the point that the raven-haired Uchiha would rather run than fight. Sasuke, Sakura mumbled, not sure what she could possibly say that would snap Sasuke out of the shape he was currently in. Naruto dodged to the side. A punch from the Kusanin just barely missing his head as he felt the wind brush by, and retaliated with a celestial slash that his opponent jumped over. For the past several minutes, whenever he attacked, the Kusanin would evade his strikes fluidly and with what looked like very little effort, and whatever attacks he didn't dodge he blocked without any strain. It wasn't just him either. Haku was going through the same thing with his own attacks. Even their best coordinated attacks received the same results. Is this the best you can do? The Kusanin taunted the pair, drawing out Naruto's ire much easier than he did Haku's. Naruto, Haku called, landing beside his teammate, keeping the blonde shinobi from jumping off to re-engage. This guy is strong, Naruto muttered out as glared at the man. Haku nodded his head in agreement. Possibly stronger than even Zabuza. The Hyoten user suggested, though he was sure that his statement was in fact true. Experience. Haku knew that he could hold his own against his old master, but despite the best combined efforts of himself and Naruto, they weren't proving to be much of a challenge for this man. Watching the fight, Sakura came to the same conclusion easily enough. Her mind raced desperately, trying to think of something that she could do to help, but against such an opponent Sakura was saddened to admit that there was nothing that she could possibly do. At that realization, Sakura's gaze shifted back to Sasuke. Yet Sasuke, who was so much more powerful, skilled, and talented than her, was too afraid to even lift a finger to help. Igniting an anger inside the Pinkett that she never thought she'd feel directed toward the Uchiha. Sasuke was focused entirely on the fight before him. Afraid as he was, he couldn't take his eyes off it. So when Sakura spoke up, he nearly jumped out of his skin, all but having forgotten that she was there. Sasuke, you have always been this super amazing and talented person in my eyes. In the academy everything just seemed to come so naturally to you. Sakura started off. You inspired me, and I think you inspired some of our classmates too. No, I'm sure you did. The Pinkett continued on with a shake of her head as she confirmed her statement. You even made Kiba and Naruto want to grow stronger, even if it was just so that they could beat you in a spar. Sakura added with a small laugh before all mirth disappeared and she stared Sasuke in his eyes. You are amazing, Sasuke, and you can say what you want about Naruto and Haku. She said, her voice faltering for a moment, hesitant to keep going. But with one quick deep breath the Pinkett steeled herself, her eyes shining with a determination and resolve that she had never felt before. But at least they're not cowards. The words coming out louder than Sakura had ever spoken to Sasuke before in her life. Sasuke stared at Sakura in wide-eyed bewilderment, unsure what he should be feeling, confusion at the fact that Sakura, one of his biggest fangirls, was actually yelling at him, or anger that she was yelling at him at all. Eventually anger won out, but not at Sakura, at himself. Anger sparked by the realization that he was being a coward. If I can't bring myself to face this freak, then how am I ever supposed to grow strong enough to kill Itachi? Sasuke thought, enraged, his Sharingan flaring to life as he glared at the Kusa ninja. Naruto and Haku took a second to catch their breath as they came to another standoff with their opponent. The fact that this was a mercy that the enemy was allowing them spoke of just how confident and self-assured he was, on just how much stronger than them he was. Damn it, he really is just playing with us, isn't he? Naruto muttered, wiping away a bead of sweat. Given how the fight had been going for the last several minutes, Naruto's question could be nothing but rhetorical. The next thing they knew, Sasuke was suddenly standing beside them, the Uchiha hardly sparing them a glance. As he focused entirely on the enemy. "That's enough, I'll deal with him," Sasuke stated, leaving no room for argument. For a moment Naruto just stared at the raw-haired Avenger silently before a smirk spread across his face. "Are you sure you can handle it, scaredy cat?" Naruto mocked him. The shaman didn't know what caused it, but Naruto could tell that his rival was back to his usual self. Arrogant bastard that he was. Still, it was much better than the coward that Sasuke was being earlier. Sasuke spared his blonde teammate a one-eyed glare, his Sharingan really making it effective. Not appreciating having that insult being thrown back at him before he shot forward. Haku watched Sasuke take off to engage the enemy, words to stop the Uchiha from a reckless and dangerous endeavor dying in his throat before they could have been given voice. With a face filled with concern, Haku split his focus between the boy facing off against their opponent. An opponent that seemed a little too thrilled with finally fighting the Uchiha, and the one standing beside him. "Sasuke is strong," Haku acknowledged. "But if the two of us together couldn't best Sasuke won't be able to do it by himself either." With that acknowledgement though came knowledge that the raven-haired Avenger wasn't any stronger than either of them. Naruto grimaced as he silently agreed with Haku. As devastating as Sasuke's current onslaught was on the Kusanin, the fact was that the man held him and Haku off for nearly half an hour now. So even at his best Naruto doubted that Sasuke could actually win. "We need to come up with something," Naruto muttered. Even if Sasuke couldn't win, he could at very least give them time to think of a plan. The Hyoten user nodded his head in agreement, his mind racing, trying to come up with something that could turn the odds in their favor. The man had dodged, blocked, or completely barreled through most of their attacks unscathed. The only time they came to landing a decisive blow was when Naruto caught the Kusanin by surprise with his sneak attack using the Shikigami no Kuni. Though after that first attack the Kusanin had started to use fire jutsu to destroy the spirit-controlled leaves. His own Hyoten jutsu were rather limited without an available source of water for Haku to use. Though he had been learning to draw water from the moisture in the air much like the Nadaime Hokage was well known for, Haku was far from being a master of the technique like the silver-haired Senju. The bigger and stronger the jutsu had Haku would use, the more time it would take to perform what Tobirama needed only seconds to do. But now that Sasuke is buying us some time, Haku thought, thinking of the possibilities now available to them. One particular idea came to mind. "Naruto," the black-haired shinobi spoke up, drawing his friend's attention before he started discussing his idea with Naruto. Having to watch the look of delight spread across his opponent's face in minute detail was one instance that Sasuke truthfully cursed the powers that the Sharingan afforded him. Sasuke knew that he would having nightmares of the man's face for days. Even with that thought in mind, or maybe because of it, Sasuke threw a punch with all his strength behind it, hoping to replace the image of the man's face with one of it warped around his fist. Unfortunately, the Kusanin seamlessly redirected his punch while also sending Sasuke's body flying over his shoulder. Unfazed, and quickly proving just skilled he was, Sasuke righted himself while in midair as he went through a string of hand seals, performing the last one just as he landed. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Bringing a hand up to his mouth, Sasuke unleashed a torrent of fire at his enemy. Before the fire could reach him, the Kusanin jumped off to the side, avoiding the flames heading his way, Sasuke spotting his actions and canceling his jutsu. With his head on a swivel, Sasuke searched for his opponent, his Sharingan eye not missing a single detail. It only took a couple of seconds for Sasuke to spot the Kusanin rushing towards him. Refusing to be the one on the defensive, Sasuke charged at the man in order to meet him head-on. Soon enough Sasuke found himself trading blows with the Kusanin, finding that even with his Sharingan he was just barely nagging to either block or dodge his opponent's attacks. What was even more frustrating was that Sasuke already knew that this wasn't the man's best. If he could outpace Haku, who was by far the fastest member of Team 7, then he shouldn't have any trouble circumventing any of Sasuke's attempts to defend himself. Yet with each traded blow the Kusanin acted more like he was sparring with the Uchiha, testing him, rather than in a serious battle. Even with this revelation, as frustrating as it might have been, Sasuke did his best to keep a level head and not let his pride at being underestimated get the better of him. After all, if the Kusa-nin would rather let himself be backed into a corner than fight back, all the better for Sasuke. The Kusa-nin was so fixated on Sasuke that there was truly a look of surprise on his face when his back suddenly came in contact with a tree trunk. Instinctively the man spared a look behind him, a distraction that Sasuke wholeheartedly capitalized on. Jumping back, Sasuke pulled out shuriken from his pouch. Sasuke's sudden movement caused the Kusa-nin's head snapped back toward the Uchiha just in time to see the shuriken speed past him. For a second, as the shuriken went wide, the Kusa-nin thought that the Uchiha had missed, only to spot the ninja wire tied to the shuriken. While initially surprised, it was curiosity more than anything that kept Kusa-nin from avoiding whatever Sasuke was planning. With a vicious smile on his face, Sasuke pulled the wire taut, forcing his opponent once more against the tree. Fire style. Dragon Flame Jutsu. Holding the tiger hand seal to his mouth, Sasuke unleashed the strongest fire jutsu that he had in his arsenal, the ninja wire that was still tied to his fingers, guiding the flames directly to the ensnared man. For a couple of seconds, as the fire jutsu completely consumed the Kusa-nin, Sasuke celebrated his victory. It didn't last long. Kukuku, the man's laughter echoed out, sending a shiver down Sasuke's spine. The flames that consumed the man died away, the ninja wire that was confining him snapped like string, as he walked forward, his long black hair obscuring his face. Sasuke, watching Kusa-nin shrug off his jutsu like it was nothing, found himself nearly taking a step back in fear and only just managed to stop himself from doing so. That is quite the fire jutsu to have in your repertoire as a mere genin, Sasuke. Most impressive. You certainly live up to your clan's legacy. The man claimed, raising his hand to brush his hair back, revealing his headband now sported a musical note instead of the Kusa emblem, and that his face had been further deformed by the flames, and looking like it could fall off at any second. That was the last thought that crossed Sasuke's mind before a wave of ki washed over him that was stronger than the first time. With eyes even more powerful than even Itachi's, the man practically purred. Hearing his brother's name, Sasuke felt his anger spike and his blood pounding in his ears. The rage he felt was almost enough for him to shake the paralysis that he was under. Almost. My name is Orochimaru, the man introduced himself, holding up the team's heaven scroll. When did Sasuke thought, shocked. Naruto was supposed to have the scroll in his possession, and at no point did the Uchiha see Orochimaru take it from the blonde. When the day arrives when you want more power. The power to kill your brother. Orochimaru intoned, igniting the scroll with his chakra alone. Then come seek me out, he told the young raven-haired Uchiha, performing a single-hand seal. Unnaturally, the man's neck extended as it shot toward Sasuke, mouth wide open, revealing a set of fangs. Get away from him. Suddenly Orochimaru watched as leaves flowed from around Sasuke, obscuring the Uchiha from the long-haired man's sight, and surged straight for him. Seeing the attack coming, the man had no choice but to abandon his attack, retracting his neck as quickly as he extended it. While he was annoyed that he was impeded from marking Sasuke with his curse seal, ultimately it was only a fleeting obstacle in his way. Your abilities are certainly surprising and intriguing. But it seems that you're somewhat of a one-trick pony, Naruto. How disappointing. This is nothing that I haven't already seen through, Orochimaru claimed tauntingly. Not like this. Aku's calm and collected voice after Naruto's loud one gave Orochimaru pause. The leaves that Orochimaru thought were meant to attack him ended up going around him, and it took only a second for the Ma-en to realize that it was in the end a diversion. That distraction only needed to last a few seconds because those leaves immediately fell away. It took a moment, but eventually Orochimaru spotted Haku far above him. But what drew his attention the most were the hundreds of leaves that floated in the air around him. Haku, his eyes closed, let out a steady breath, a cold mist coming from his mouth. As his eyes slowly drew open, the leaves stilled and froze over until it looked like diamonds were hanging midair. Collaboration Jutsu, Frozen Leaf Storm. Once Haku called out the jutsu's name, the frozen leaves shot toward Orochimaru. Reacting on instinct, Orochimaru jumped away from the oncoming attack, unleashing a fire jutsu as he did so. That won't work this time, Haku called out. Unlike before, Sasuke had given Haku more than enough time properly summon ice with his bloodline so they wouldn't be susceptible to fire. Haku's point was proven a second later when the crystallized leaves flew through the flames completely unaffected. Unimpeded, the leaves changed course to continue following Orochimaru. The Oto Nin scowled lightly, even while a part of his mind was highly intrigued by this call. Laboration technique that the young shaman and Hyoten user managed to pull off, but this was just another inconvenience that was standing in his way. Just before he ended up being shredded by the Liev. Orochimaru replaced himself a mud clone. Appearing a few feet away, Orochimaru immediately had to move as the frozen leaves rained down on him. Despite how confident Orochimaru was in his ability to avoid Naruto and Haku's combined attack, he couldn't deny that it was rather exasperating and tiresome being on the receiving end of an endless onslaught. He found himself having to frequently jump from one tree to another to keep from being surrounded. Orochimaru was mid-jump, his attention focused on keeping an eye out for any of the crystal-like leaves so he missed what laid ahead in the shadow of the trees. It started as the slightest of brushes that didn't even register in the man's mind, but those brushes soon started to increase in number and interval. Then he felt how his body was gradually slowing, and it was at that point that Orochimaru realized that there was something clinging to his body. Looking down, Orochimaru found leaves, regular inconspicuous leaves, and quite a few of them. He had been so focused on avoiding the frozen leaves he had forgotten to be weary of the unassuming ones. The man didn't have a chance to react because a moment later the ice-covered leaves immediately besieged him till his form was completely covered. For a moment Team 7 stared at the amassed shards of frozen leaves with mounting hope and relief. Naruto himself was grinning widely, fully believing that they had managed to defeat the Oto Nin. That belief was quickly wiped away when a chuckle that sent shivers down their spines came from directly behind Naruto. Kukuku, my, that was close. That is certainly quite the jutsu you've managed to come up with, Orochimaru said mirthfully. Leaning forward, Orochimaru drew closer to Naruto, the Uzumaki feeling himself break out in a cold sweat, until he was close enough to whisper into the boy's ear. Although I imagine it was only possible because of the Hyoten bloodline your friend possesses and your own spiritual abilities, isn't that right, Naruto? Acting on a primal survival instinct, Naruto leapt away from the man. His senses were screaming was a predator in the worst way, or at least he tried to. Naruto had no sooner leapt off the tree branch before he felt a hand squeezing around his neck. The next thing that the blonde shaman knew was the feeling of the back of his head slamming against the trunk of a tree hard enough to cause the wood to splinter. And what he faintly thought was the warm trickle of blood flowing from the back of his head and down his neck. With a grimace, Naruto was barely able to get one eye open in time to watch. Unfortunately, as he cringed even worse, as the hand around his neck was replaced by the man's exceedingly long tongue. Under normal circumstances I wouldn't even consider running the risk. Orochimaru started, his ability to speak completely unhampered by having his tongue wrapped around Naruto. But I also can't ignore an opportunity such as this. A shinobi with access to the power and world of spirits. The black-haired man continued unzipping Naruto's jacket and raising his shirt to reveal the seal on his stomach. Orochimaru gathered chakra to the tips of his fingers, each one igniting with purple-like flames of chakra. Five-pronged seal. Orochimaru slammed his hand into Naruto's stomach, then pulled it back to reveal the new seal. That should take care of the most troublesome problem, he murmured mostly to himself. While it hadn't been necessary for him to cut the boy's connection to the Kyuubi, he also didn't know what kind of effect the Biju would have on his curse seal. Since he's never had the chance to apply it on a Jinchuriki before. At least like this, the chance for interference by the Biju would be mitigated, at least initially. He had no doubts that Sarutobi would have the five-pronged seal removed as soon as he found out about it. I hope you survive this gift I'm about to give you, Naruto. Orochimaru said slyly, unwinding his tongue from around the boy. Staring into the blonde's eyes. Orochimaru took extra delight that as dazed as the Uzumaki was from his head injury, and having his connection to the Kyuubi forcibly cut, his eyes still managed to envy the understanding that what came next would be much worse. Without another word, Orochimaru sank his fangs into Naruto's neck, drawing a deafening pain-filled scream from the Uzumaki. Eventually Naruto just passed out. Drawing back, Orochimaru watched as the cursed seal formed at the base of the boy's neck. Studying it, it first reminded the man of Kimamaro's Earth curse mark, but the lines were far too curved, looking more like crescent moons. I've never seen this curse mark before. The black-haired man mused to himself, and considering he was the one who created the curse seal, it was all the more surprising. A possible product of the boy's spiritual abilities. Orochimaru wondered curiously. There was so much that he didn't know and also fascinating. He was so going to enjoy examining Naruto. Orochimaru had no sooner let Naruto fall against the tree they were standing on than he had to dodge an attack from Haku. Haku stood in a silent rage, glaring at Orochimaru with eyes colder than the bloodline his clan was known for. For just a second Haku had honestly believed that their battle with Orochimaru had come to a close, so he ended up dropping his guard, and because of it his friend was captured by the enemy. It was only when Orochimaru had released Naruto that Haku was assured that the man wouldn't be able to kill the blonde by easily snapping his neck that Haku allowed himself to act. With his rage fueling him, Haku was able to push himself into creating an ice mirror, far faster than he had ever before, between Naruto and Orochimaru. Orochimaru quirked an eyebrow at Haku's fully formed ice mirror, discerning it with a dissecting eye. In the next instant Orochimaru could spot Haku appearing on the other side of the mirror in a burst of speed that he hadn't seen before. A quick glance showed another ice mirror where Haku had previously stood. Jumping away, the man sent snakes from his sleeves at Haku. Orochimaru held no illusions of his attack doing anything but stalling the young Hyoten user temporarily, but that was fine since that was his intention. Before anyone knew what was happening, the snake man stood several feet away from Sasuke, and once more his neck elongated till his fangs sunk into the Uchiha's neck. As he allowed his curse seal to form, Orochimaru's gaze landed on the pink-haired member of the team and found himself rather disappointed. For just a moment he was vulnerable as the seal took root, and yet the girl did nothing to take advantage of that, as futile as her attempt might have been, and instead just watched on in fear. He did not let it bother him. This had already dragged on for far longer than he planned, and he was sure that it wouldn't be long now before someone, or rather several people, showed up. After the curse seal finished forming, taking quick note that it was the curse seal of heaven, Orochimaru turned his gaze towards Haku. It was admittedly very tempting for the man to also mark the last remaining boy, but despite his greed, he was still a pragmatic person, and the risk far outweighed any potential benefits that came with obtaining the Hyoten Kekkei Genkei. "What the hell did you do to them?" Sakura demanded, holding the unconscious Uchiha. "What did you do to Sasuke and Naruto?" Although she tried to come off strong, and rage boiled in her veins, she couldn't quite keep a slight quiver from her voice or the tears that appeared in the corner of her eyes. "What I have done is bestow them with a gift," Orochimaru answered slyly. "With the chance of obtaining power, and when the time comes, and it will, they will seek me out desiring more," the snake man told her, and with those parting words sunk into the tree trunk that he had been standing on. With Orochimaru having abruptly left, Haku and Sakura were quick to carry Naruto and Sasuke, respectively, away from the site of their battle in fear that other teams would show up in order to investigate. "What are we going to do now?" Sakura asked the slightly older teen, panting slightly. One of Sasuke's arms thrown over her shoulder so that she could carry him. "Should we go to the tower?" Haku thought Sakura's suggestion over for a moment. "No," Haku eventually decided with a shake of his head. "We don't have both scrolls, so we won't be able to enter. Besides, there will probably be other teams waiting to ambush anyone that approaches an ID. Out that I will be able to fight off 3 opponents while protecting you all." What Haku didn't say was just how low on chakra he currently was. "I think the best option is to find a place to hold you and wait for Naruto and Sasuke to recover." Looking over at Naruto, who was on his back. "Whenever that will be." Haku wished he knew what Orochimaru did to his friend and teammate, wished he knew at those things that had appeared on Naruto and Sasuke's necks were, but he didn't, and all he could do now was hope that they would regain consciousness. Sakura's gaze lowered as she nodded her head forlornly. With a shared look, Haku and Sakura took off once more in search of a place they could rest. Looking at what was happening before her, Sakura cursed her own weakness as she found herself wondering just how unlucky Team 7 could be. Their first C-rank mission, their run-in with Orochimaru, and now having to fight off the Sound team while half of her team was incapacitated and Haku was away gathering food and water was horrible. but was par of the course. When the foreign team first appeared, Sakura did her best and fought valiantly to keep them away from her unconscious teammates. Though, she was grateful when Lee and then Ino and her team had shown when it became evident that, despite her best efforts, she wasn't strong enough on her own to protect Sasuke and Naruto. Though her self-oathing at her weakness only grew as her friends were slowly beaten and she could do nothing. Then Lee's teammates appeared and Sasuke woke up. But it was a different Sasuke from the one she knew. Instead of elation at seeing the Uchiha up, Sakura could only feel an almost primal fear at the sight of him. Of the purple chakra that twisted around him and the black flame-like pattern that spread across half of his body. And that she could see gradually creeping further. His words were of concern for her, but she could see a rage behind his Sharingan eyes that Sakura feared would be turned on her if the Oto Nin, Zaku, hadn't opened his mouth and drawn Sasuke's notice. But to watch him nearly rip someone's arms out was hardly a better alternative. That is quite enough, Sasuke. Haku said, suddenly appearing beside the Uchiha, a firm hold on one of Sasuke's arms. Haku. Sasuke retorted warningly, releasing his hold on Zaku, allowing the team to drop to ground unceremoniously. For a moment the two raven-haired boys just stared at each other as the tension in the air once more started to mount. That tension though came to an immediate end when Sasuke felt someone slam into his back and arms wrap around him. Please Sasuke, that's enough, Sakura begged, the tears she cried hidden with her head buried against his back. Please just stop, please. As Sasuke calmed down, Dosu kept a cautious eye on the Uchiha. With both his teammates incapacitated, the bowl-cut kid's teammates there, and the arrival of the fourth member of the Uchiha's team, the tides had definitely turned. So, guardedly, the mummified man moved forward, drawing all eyes to him as he slowly placed his team's earth scroll on the ground. Here, Dosu presented the scroll. In exchange, you'll let me and my teammates go. He bargained. A discussion wasn't even necessary. Haku simply nodded his head and the bandaged man quickly went to retrieve his two teammates before fleeing. As the Konoha shinobi took a moment after Oto team left to talk amongst each other, Haku had his attention focused solely on his still unconscious friend. Whatever Orochimaru had done to Sasuke, it was obviously not a good thing, and now Haku found himself more concerned than ever for Naruto and what it might be doing to him. A pair of golden slit eyes snapped open, which in itself was strange as the owner of said eyes knew that shouldn't be possible for him to open them. Orochimaru's gaze shifted, taking in his surrounding and trying to make sense of what was going on. While not quite recognizing where he was, the man acknowledged at it looked a lot like the sewers under Konoha that once upon a time led to his secret lab. Yet, again, that shouldn't be possible because not only was he sure this wasn't Konohagakure, but he wasn't even really Orochimaru. Rather, he was a piece of the real Sanin's soul that was attached to the curse seal when the original imparted them. With no other recourse, the snake-like man began to walk down corridor in search of anything. He passed countless corridors, all shadowed a few feet and making it impossible to see anything deeper. At one point he tried to go down one of these passages only to see out to an identical-looking hallway to the one he had been in before. Frustratingly, neither jutsu nor summons seemed to be available to him, making it impossible to determine if he was in fact in the same hall or a different one. Eventually Orochimaru came across an impossibly large room, and at the other end twin iron-barred doors stretched across the entirety of the room, held closed by a single piece of paper with kanji for seal written on it. Behind the caged doors, amongst the endless darkness, Orochimaru could just make out something terribly large. Is that? Orochimaru murmured with awing realization of where exactly he was. He had no sooner come to that realization than he felt something pierce his back and looked down to find a blade sticking out of his chest. The black-haired Ma-en struggled to form words as blood slowly fell from his lips. Yes, a voice, a distorted, twisted yet familiar voice, answered. After a hacking cough that saw more blood spill from the man's lips, the voice continued. Sorry, not sorry. But this body is cramped enough as is. Don't worry though, I'll make sure that little gift of yours is put to good use. The voice promised. The last thing that fragment of Orochimaru's soul saw before it returned to oblivion was mirth-filled red slit eyes gazing at him from the darkness. When Naruto awoke, it was to the feeling of extreme disorientation and a piercing headache. Naruto, you're awake. Haku's voice appearing kneeling at the blonde's side. How are you feeling? The Hyoten user asked carefully. After what happened with Sasuke earlier, Haku was cautious of the blonde shinobi in case he was acting strange. Haku? Naruto questioned, still a bit confused before his eyes widened in remembrance. Down, he shouted, jumping at and knocking the black-haired boy over. What happened? Where is he, that long-haired weirdo? Naruto questioned, looking around wildly. Geez, even when you first wake up you're loud. Shikamaru grumbled as he and Choji made their way over to the pair. Naruto stared at the two with apparent confusion. Huh, Shikamaru, Choji, when did you two get here? He questioned. With a heavy sigh, Shikamaru shook his head disbelievingly. Seriously? How could you miss everything that just went down? The Nara questioned skeptically. He was injured during our last battle. Haku defended his friend vaguely, intentionally leaving out all details about their fight with Orochimaru. So, how are you feeling, Naruto? The long black-haired boy asked once more. Naruto stared at Haku for a moment in confusion before proceeding to give himself a pat down. Besides a headache, I feel fine. Naruto answered him. Are you sure? Haku pressed. How's your neck? My neck. Naruto reiterated, his confusion doubling. Running his hands on more along his neck, Naruto once more failed to find anything particularly strange or which hurt, so with a shake of his head Naruto stated that he was fine. With a frown present on his face and eyes narrowing, Haku moved closer to Naruto. Excuse me, Haku muttered as he got a better look of the blonde shaman's neck. While he had no idea what it was, and even after what happened with Sasuke, Haku couldn't make heads or tails of the strange seal or why Naruto hadn't reacted like Sasuke had. Not that that's a bad thing, Haku silently thought to himself. While confident that he could eventually subdue the blonde shinobi, Haku would have been far more reluctant to hurt Naruto than he would Sasuke. Haku. Naruto spoke, drawing the Hyoten user out of his thoughts. Oh, sorry. Haku murmured, backing off. Very much aware of the two other boys standing close by, Haku thought it best not to mention the seal to Naruto until they were alone. Especially since he had nothing in the form of answers for the blonde if he were to ask any questions. I was worried about an injury you sustained, but you seem fine now. He lied smoothly enough. Naruto nodded his head slowly, still very much confused but accepting. A couple of hours later, Team 7 was getting ready to set out for the tower located in the center of the forest. With the scroll that they had gotten from the Oto team and the they liberated from the Aim Nin, they now possessed the two scrolls that they needed to pass the second exam. A fact that Naruto took great delight in pointing out to Sasuke, much to the Uchiha's chagrin. Now Haku and Sakura were working on storing away the last of their gear before setting out. Sakura, Haku called out to his pink-haired teammate after several minutes of comfortable silence between the two. The young woman responded, stopping what she was doing to stare at the slightly older boy. Turning to face the girl, Haku took a second to take in the girl's appearance. There were clear indicators that the girl had been in a fight, bruises and cuts that Haku had treated to the best of his abilities, but still obviously healing. Just as noticeable as her injuries though was that Sakura's once long hair now fell to just above her shoulders, having been forced to cut it during her fight with the team from Oto. If he wasn't slightly afraid of her reaction, Haku would have told Sakura that her new look wasn't all that different from Anna's. I wanted to apologize, he admitted. Apologize? Sakura parroted, bewildered. For what? Before you suggested that we should head to the tower when Naruto and Sasuke were unconscious, and I told you I couldn't fight an entire team off and protect you three at the same time. Haku reminded the pinkett. I said that, and yet you held a team by yourself while protecting Naruto and Sasuke. So, I'm sorry. You are far stronger than I gave you credit for, Haku said with all the sincerity he was capable of. Blinking a couple of times. As she processed Haku's words, a sad smile soon spread across Sakura's face as she shook her head gently. No, it's okay, you don't have to apologize. She melancholily refuted. It's not like you were wrong. If Lee and Ino and her team hadn't shown up when they did, I would have been beaten and then Sasuke would have been. Sakura choked up at the end, unable to bring herself to finish on what would have happened to the last Uchiha once she lost. Her own fate and Naruto's were also up for question, but it was unlikely to have ended well for them either. I am weak. Sakura admitted, but even so, Haku could see the embers of determination starting to burn in her eyes. But I'll grow stronger. Strong enough to protect the people who need me, she declared resolutely. For a moment Haku stared at the girl in stunned silence, but soon enough he smiled encouragingly at her. I know you will, Sakura. He agreed wholeheartedly. When Naruto and I met, I told him something that I want to tell you now. How one becomes truly strong. Haku told her, drawing the girl's curiosity as she leaned forward interested. Someone can become truly strong once they have something precious that they want to protect. The black-haired Hyoten user said. If you have that, then surely it will only a matter of time before you grow stronger. Something precious, Sakura mused. Hey Sakura, Haku, are you done yet? Let's go. Naruto shouted out to the pair. With a light chuckle, Haku shook his head at Naruto's exuberance before the two quickly finished packing before rejoining Naruto and Sasuke. They had an exam to finish. That's it for today. I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.